Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, Paranormal Portal Podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together.
Hey everybody, are we 5-5? Can you hear me out there loud and clear, loud and clear? Happy holidays, happy holidays. So whatever you're celebrating, may it be happy. And I am so happy you are here with me tonight. When I get a 5-5, it looks like I'm all good here. We're broadcasting hard and heavy. We're loud and proud. So you guys can hear me, we're good. Yep, 5-5. Boy, it's such a delay. If I look at my phone, I get the messages on this so much quicker than I do up on my big screen or this one over here. It's really funny. Okay, 5-5. Welcome in, welcome in. I hope your Sunday's going great. If it's Monday already, Mr. Ted and the brave Sir Robin over there. Nothing scary to report, Ted. We good? Good. Hello, lovely Ted, and all your wonderful fur babies out there. I'm here to tell you that I promised I wasn't going to buy any gifts this year, just practical stuff. Celebrate the love and maybe some food and stuff. Somebody said they baked chocolate chip cookies today. Can you send me one or two of those? Just, I don't care if they're crumbly in an envelope. Just put them in an envelope, send them in care of the show. And I will make sure they are well enjoyed. I will eat every single crumb. I love chocolate chip cookies. Hello, Worldwide Ghost. Welcome in. Lovely Ted. Lovely Vixen. Hello, Renice. Welcome. And Edna. Hello. Let's see who else we have here. Let's see. Uncommon Belief. Glenn. Fantastic. And there's me. Big Cole. Hi, Big Cole. Welcome, everybody. So here's the thing. It's been very interesting this week because I told you guys to think about Lizzie. And I also kind of talked a little bit about what it must have been like, to be her and, this family and to go through that time. And, we said some pretty profound things that I got from Dr. Corey. And now keep this in mind. I've been at this, I want to say a solid 9 weeks maybe. And, that it doesn't sound like a lot of times. Hey, are you kidding me? Welcome in, sweetheart. It doesn't sound like a lot of time, 9 weeks. And I hope that red light isn't bothering you, but I'm trying to get light on the turn on the red light. You don't have to. Maybe if I do that. But anyway, Chrome, I was just setting it up. Chrome updated. It seems like they're going to let me play videos now. Raising heck and Kane with the StreamYard back and forth and all this other stuff. So it's been nuts. Okay. But I think we've got it to where the videos won't drag because, like I said, I hate it when, we go through making all these videos and it's got just nice timing and everything and it's lagging behind the sound. It's very irritating. You guys are seeing it that way. I want the absolute best for you guys that I can give. Even though I keep making mistakes here and there, it's just going to happen. Like this one gentleman I'm going to talk about tonight, I kept calling him, I called him so many different names. His name is Dave Norton. He has a wonderful YouTube channel. And I wanted to give him a shout out. His YouTube channel is called Discovering New England History. I believe the actual channel, though, is just Dave Norton. He is on YouTube. So jot that down. Now, why am I saying jot that down? Glenn, if I didn't say hi to you, honey, hello. I'm going to ask you guys to step up and throw out your ideas during this. This is the second part, and it's the last. We're going to finish up with her. Thank you, Renice. Can you just have a cookie for me? And if you remember from last year, if you weren't here, we were talking about how important it is to eat the good cookie. Do you guys remember that? Because so many people who bake cookies, they give all the nice cookies to everybody else and they eat the broken ones and the ones that didn't suck to the pan and all that. I want you to eat at least 1 or 2 good cookies and enjoy a nice hot cup of tea, which I have somewhere. I do. I have my rose mint. So being that this is the hot mess roller coaster, And again, some of you ride in the front, some of you in the back, some of you in the middle, just go, wee, we have a great time. But, some of you guys really like to dig into this and talk about it and toss the ideas around your head. Been having some great conversations in the comments because, like I said last week, think about this. Think about what it was like to be her. Like Dr. Corey said, that, it's so hard for our 21st century minds, and, this is not verbatim, I promise you, but it's close. I paraphrase that it's a 21st century mind trying to understand what it was like to live in the 1890s, and it's very, very hard. Licking the spoon. Amen. So it is difficult, and we also talked last week about many things I'm going to touch on here real quick just to recap that you're going back to 1890. The book started to be written right after the trial. And again, one of the myths was that Lizzie tried to stop that printing. It was called The Tragedy of Fall River. Never happened. She wasn't happy about it, but she did not stop. Vixen gets the bowl. Yep, there you go. And Ted, you have to share. You have to share. I hope there's 2 bowls. And so the thing is it's very difficult to understand, and people can take a narrative and they can mold it, if it's malleable, and mold it to their narrative, to the point they're trying to make. And I'm not trying to do that. Even though I said reasonable doubt, I don't have to bend anything here to make it go towards reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt was proved in 1893 with the trial. She was acquitted, plain and simple, by 12 men. Okay, women were not allowed to be on juries at that time. She was immediately tried in the press, of course, in all the papers, and, through gossip, and we all know about that, everybody leaning on the fence telling what they thought, what was going on. Then you've got the people that just want to interject themselves, into a crime. We saw that with Bonnie and Clyde, did we not? People trying to say, hey, I saw Bonnie, shoot that police officer. First, he was like way, far on his farm, pruning, I guess, rose bushes or something like that. And then he was, another 50 yards closer. And before you know it, he's like right up on it, hiding behind the bush, saw the whole thing and heard her say that his head bounced like a rubber ball. Never happened. This was a man that just wanted to be, when people started asking him questions, he wanted to have something to say. Does that make sense? So people try to interject themselves into these things. And then there's people who did see something and speak up. And maybe it didn't fit a narrative. Maybe it didn't fit the way, the police officers or investigators or, the prosecution or the defense wanted to go. So it was ignored. Right? I mean, that's normal. It happens today. Yeah. We've got our suspect. We're not looking any further. We see it happen all the time, especially in, a domestic killing where it was, a husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. And right away, the first suspect is the husband or the wife, or you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Notoriety. They love it. That's it. Or otherwise boring life. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes a bunch of reporters, and journalists, all running at you with their pad and paper, and they, want to know what you saw and what. Thank you, Anna. And yes, please hit the thumbs up. And also, if you want, hit the PayPal. We've got super chats. We've got the thank yous after the fact, a little heart underneath when the video loads. We've got the T-shirts and the cups and the mugs. They make great, fill them with Skittles or something. Put them in somebody's stocking. Get them a nice crispy mug or if you like the one with Steve and, just whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. There's an old-fashioned vintage one and there's some other stuff, and that's the tpublic.com. I believe they're having a sale right now. I do not know if we'll get it to you in time for Christmas. That's all them. It's not me. Maybe one day I'll just, they don't give any kind of cut for authors to buy a bunch and then sell them, and I'm not going to jack them up. So I'd rather you guys just get the whatever sales out there, get it, try not to pay too much shipping and all that stuff. But get it, and I get a little kickback from that, but it's, and it's every little bit counts. So we appreciate that so much. So thumbs up and sharing is great too. All right. So whatever you can do or commenting, that's great because it all goes into the pot for this wonderful family. Okay. So back to narratives can be, wishy washy and, eyewitnesses. Yeah. Oh, you have the shut the fuck up cakes tea? That's great, Anna. And how do you, it's fantastic. I love that. And it's nice quality and all. You're happy with it, sweetie? I'm so glad. Good. I have a couple things. I'm wearing a hoodie right now, and my son's got a hoodie and a couple, all different stuff all over the place. Love the mugs. I like the tumblers too. My tumbler tonight is not a crispy one though. It's the little. Well, you can't see it because it's got a green stripe in it, but it's all green, invisible trees and red trucks and very Christmassy. I hope you like the opening. Wasn't that cute with all the animals? I'm getting ready for Rob Guttrow. He's coming on next week. I have lots of animal videos there. His new book is called. I know I'm jumping all over the place. Put your seatbelts on. Just strap yourself in, or just kick back and, enjoy the ride. I'll get you there. So he's coming, and we like to do a lot of fun stuff with him. His new book is Cats in Spirit, spirit cats and communication. So this one's going to be it'll be a lovely one. It's going to be a heart squeezing one, I think, a little bit, because of course so many of us have lost furry loved ones. Me recently with Mr. Dickens, the Christmas baby, and it's our first Christmas without him. Well, he's here, but and he's mentioned every day in this house, I assure you. So, but that was going to be lovely, and I hope it helps some people over some stuff also. And if you've never even had a pet, I think it's going to be very interesting. Rob is a lovely gentleman, and he usually comes in here around Christmas time, and we're going to try to get him on even more. Okay, he's brilliant. Uh, you know, uh, Outside of being a medium and everything else, I'll let him tell you what he does, but I think it's absolutely amazing, and he's a great person. I've known him quite a while, and he always makes you feel better and a little bit closer to those that have crossed over that rainbow bridge. And of course, Lynn will be here. Lynn is going to be here with us Christmas night. Now, her and I talked about it. I said, look, I'm there for everybody. I don't know what you're doing Christmas night. If you can't be here, don't worry about it. Do you be with the family? Don't let me take you away from that. But if this happens to be your family at that time, it hits you wherever you are, we will be here Christmas night. We are going to talk about the next phase after you cross over with Lynn. So that's that. Back to Lizzie. So this is what I'd like you to do. I don't know what your theory is about Lizzie, or if you even have one, but I was talking with Lauren through the comments, and she said some lovely things. First, very absolutely wonderful things about the show, and I wanted to pull it up for you so I could share it with you if you hadn't seen it in the comments. But I had spoken with a couple of people throughout the week, and a lot of people giving their theories, different ones. I think Lizzie didn't do it, but she may have known who did it. They thought Lizzie might have been in cahoots with someone else, or Uncle John Morse, and all that. So we're going to get through all that so you guys have that information. Lizzie did it and got away with it. There's a couple of good theories out there we talked about the one that was brought up by a letter from a young girl to the prosecutor, and said, I think she did it in the nude. Well, from that letter, it made the transcripts of the trial. It actually suggested that it was possible she did that to give them an idea. She certainly didn't have time to change twice. Everybody said in the trial transcripts, anybody that had a comment on that, Bridget Sullivan, the maid, I believe it was Mrs. Churchill, that said that they had seen her in the same dress. And then you've got people that are just making up stuff and said, no, she was wearing a pink dress, and then she was wearing this dress. No. Trial transcripts and most of the people that saw her said that, the dress didn't change. So she really didn't have time. We're going to watch this little documentary, and I'm going to talk throughout it And I want you guys to speak up too, that if you hear someone, one of the historians or something else, bending something, speak up. This was done in the 90s, the documentary we're going to watch. And, by then you'd figure they'd have it because that's 100 years, right? That's 100 years from 1890 to 1990, 100 years. You think by then they would have had all the information that they could have gathered. Now, again, you have people that want to write a book and go in this direction. So they move everything with that. There's, I don't know, maybe 5 to 7 books that say that Uncle John Morse did it. There's some that said Lizzie couldn't have done it, that it was some serial killer. Again, I'm kind of open to that one as well. Um, all these different conspiracies. Of course, there's the ones that just made up all out of whole cloth that she was abused as a child. We'll never know that. There was never any evidence on that, just rumor, and not a current rumor in the town at the time. It all came out after the fact, about 10 to 15 years after, where this one lady who wrote an early book stated that she thought that that was possible. Well, that's not really evidence, is it? Yeah, it was Jeffrey McDonald. Could have very well been. I still think he did it. Again, I know Donnie disagrees with me, and that's fine. It's because, he's also looking all the other murders there, and perhaps I need to look into the other murders, or Kevin Bacon, other murders around there, because that was just so suspicious. But there's just something about the guy. There was something about the guy. And in this case, there's something about Lizzie. And it's not that people said that she had an odd behavior. She didn't. She didn't. She had an air, but a lot of people did back then, especially if you were 30 something, you were unmarried, you're in this, Gilded Age era. You should be socializing with a higher class, but you cannot get there because your father won't do what's needed to be done to be accepted to that. Okay. So you're stuck here and you're not moving. She could have maybe went abroad. Again, we're thinking 21st century, but she could have gone abroad and met somebody, a cruise ship, and just, through caution of the wind, and, got married or whatever, like a Titanic thing or something, one of those made up Titanic or Love Boat kind of deal. 10,000 different things we can say she could have done. Let's talk about what she did do, okay, and what the people around her did. So to recap for last year, get a pen, a paper, or pencil or whatever, write down who you think did it. Maybe the names of the characters. I'm going to go over that again. Everybody that was kind of, in that, the main characters, so to speak. And think of that time. We talked about, all the different things that basically experts and historians can basically be wrong without intent. They're just mistaken. Like a lot of these people that say it had to be somebody that they knew. Is that light bothering you guys? Let me see if I can do this. Maybe that's better. Okay, maybe that's better. But we have to, like I said, look at the time it is, and then look at everybody around there and see what their motive was. Okay, and what it was like to be in that time. Poor Andrew is called a skinflint and a miser and all this. Spinster old maid, Vixen. That's right. That's what they were called. And it just sounds so awful, doesn't it? She was 32 years old. She wasn't married. Abby married Andrew. She was, I think, 37 or 39 when she married him. For the same reason. Again, business and two families connecting, very much like royal families. The prince marrying the princess to make two households one, that kind of thing. Plus, he needed somebody for his kids. You look at Andrew and you think that he probably wasn't the type of guy that was, about and on the town and a real ladies' man either, but he had a lot of money. I mean, at the time he was worth about, I think it was $300,000, which would have been like 10 million now or something like that. Now time. Hi, Sapphire Elf. But I have all those details. I don't want to get them wrong. But, then experts and witnesses and, all the municipalities, law enforcement, judicial, all of that. They can do it with intent. And I don't mean the kind of intent they can do it in a sinister, willful intent like they do with Bonnie and Clyde, saying that it wasn't Henry, it was Bonnie who shot the police officer because they were going to clear Henry and give him amnesty so he would be a witness. And then they got him with the Oklahoma murder. You remember all that? So that was for, they didn't want the public to know that they were letting a guy off that they killed two police officers. Like one wasn't enough. The reasoning behind some of this is crazy. But so they can do it on purpose. And basically, also, we have our suspect. We're not interested in this. We're dead set on this. We're not doing anything else. And we know that to be true. How do we know that to be true in the Lizzie Borden trial? What did I tell you last time in part 1 that would convince you that they had Lizzie as a suspect? They were fixed on her. They really weren't looking at anybody else. What did they do at the end of the trial? They took all the evidence that they had and handed it to Lizzie. Said, here, you can have this. She said she didn't want it. And she gave it to Mr. Jennings, her lawyer. He kept it for quite a while. And I think 2 generations down, finally gave it to one of the historical societies, the museums. Have you ever heard of that? Where evidence was just given up when they did not have a conviction. And, with a cold case, it's still open. Thank you, Uncommon Belief. Appreciate that. Yep, there's my Tea Public. Thank you. Get you a mug, get you a t-shirt, get you something, get you a pillow. Get you a pillow crispy on it. You can hug them when you're scared, when you're watching the show. But, so I've never heard of that before. I can't say it's never happened, but that ought to tell you that they were done. Lizzie was their person. She was acquitted. Here's the evidence. We're not even looking anymore, right? So, that being said, I'm going to go over a couple of the other things we went on last week, but write down who you think it is, even if it's just for yourself. Right, only when it's rubbish and not evidence. That's possible, but I think in a lot of cases they keep stuff because, you can go back to a case 25, 30 years, and, I've known cases that have been solved because, I'm sorry, I'm getting some kind of noise here, so I'm going to check this. But cases that have been solved going back over evidence that has been held for decades, right? So, yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Okay. I don't want you guys to get any feedback there. That should be better if you were hearing that. So, yeah, cold case files, exactly. So there's that. So jot it down or whatever. But I wanted to share this with you guys. Lauren gave me permission to tell you guys this, and I thought it was interesting. The more I learn of Mr. Borden, the more empathy I have for him, as his upper-class kinfolk probably look down their noses at his tight-fistedness. He was probably so careful with his money so that his immediate family, wife, daughters, would not be in the future poverty-stricken. It's a good point. Okay? He was poverty-stricken. He knew how hard it was to get himself up because he was a self-made man. He was not one of the rich Bordens. There's 200 Borden families in Fall River. Hey, Lynn, welcome in, sweetie. Hello, darling. Lots of love to you, sweetie. There was 200 Borden families in Fall River. And they were all distantly related, but at one point in time, I think it was 2 great-grandfathers above him. That's where the money split. One side lost it and the other side kept it, and it kept growing, and then this side had to be, build themselves back up again. And Andrew Borden did so. Which I am certain modern people don't get with all our debit and credit cards that are used way too much at times. This is a great point. I told her, truth spoken. That's just another thing to look at. And here I thought this was very, very lovely. And you guys give such lovely comments. And I wish I could read every single one of them. And one night, again, we'll do that with the Gatekeepers Gallery. It just takes so much time and research and all that. It's tough. So I can't do it all, or I won't do any of it halfway decent. You know what I mean? Okay. Halfway decent is the best with Hot Mess Express. Woo, woo. So I am filling up your comment section too much. No, never comment away. I I have a lot of fun listening to the episodes that I have had time to listen to. And one thing really awesome you do is give the individual in the past cold case examples and mysteries not yet totally solved. You give that often misunderstood person the benefit of the doubt. Why not? And I love that you guys see that. This is not the only comment I've got like this, and I love that you see that because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just trying to give us another look at an older case that we might have just took for granted that the person was guilty. Some people didn't even know she was acquitted, you know, right? So thank you for standing up for Miss Lizzie Borden. We may not find out who did it, but you make a great defense. Well, thank you, Lauren, and thank you everybody who has commented here. And I thank you mostly for noticing because that's exactly what I'm trying to do. You know. Oh, Ted, you are so. Oh, buy a lard candle. That buy a lard there, sweetie. Thank you so much. Crisco, I was looking for Crisco today. It's getting hard to find out here. Um, I hard candles. Tell you what, they'll keep you warm, sweetie. Thank you, darling. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So, yeah, I don't know what you're thinking now, but I got shifted on this one big time. Again, I heard a couple things and I thought them to be true, and both the babies in the basket asleep. I can't believe it. They're just adorable. Um, well, see, Lynn, a lot of people did think she was. But again, when I look back, there was zero evidence for that. It seems like the strangest thing that was happening in that family that I can find evidence for was the way the house was laid out and how easy it was for everybody to avoid everybody else, kind of coming and going. And I think you guys can think that's also possible for people have these big houses where you don't even know if somebody else is home on the other end, very possible. That's the way they worked it. It's like Abby and the stepmother and Andrew used the back staircase to go up to their bedroom, and Lizzie and Bridget and her sister Emma used the front staircase to go up to their. Everything was just separated. Locks were on both sides of the door. Now, see, Lynn, I believe that there was some kind of abuse going on too, because I was hearing a lot of creepy things between her and her dad. Again, I start digging back and I go past the books that seem to have made that up out of whole cloth, and then everybody ran from that book forward and went past that before that, and it was like nothing from the townspeople, no titter tatter, gossip about that or anything else. And last weekend we also said that she was in a long time romantic romance, stacks and stacks of letters, a long time. The way it was referred to me was quite possibly, more than 2 decades with this one gentleman. And the gentleman's family does not want to release the letters because they don't want the notoriety. Now, there's people at the Fall River Historical Society that have seen those with their own eyes. They're sworn to secrecy on the family until I guess the next generation passes or whatever. But these kind of things, that of course that doesn't mean she wasn't abused. It doesn't mean that she wasn't, what do the kids say today, fluid or going back and forth or experimental or whatever. Again, and I don't care. I would care if she was being abused. You see what I mean? And then that flipped her. But that also goes with trying to demonize the victims almost to make them feel like they deserved it. They've also made out Abby Borden, the stepmother, to be this crotchety old mean woman and everything else. And everybody in the town, really, really liked her. All the neighbors said she was the best friend and one of the best neighbors they ever had. The next door neighbor said she just lost the best friend and best neighbor she had ever had. When people were sick, sometimes they sent for her, which is why you hear about that letter. Somebody was sick, and Abby may have gone there. Of course, they never found the letter. But so there's that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to quickly recap some of the things we showed last week in the benefit, basically like Lauren said, the benefit of the doubt here, and what we proved last week to not be true in some of the things that we've heard, such as the house being stifling. It wasn't. Nobody had been in that house. It was a private residence in 1996. And everybody before that wrote a book about it just made it up. They'd never been in the house. It was a rumor that there was only locks on the outside of the door, adding to the whole abuse thing of locking people in their bedrooms and not letting them out. Not true. There were locks on both sides of the door. These were doors, if you've ever had a house that had a back entrance and both sides of the door had it. No, Leonard anymore wasn't there, I don't think. If he had been, it would have been a closed case. This had been handled. You know what I mean? So they didn't have Leonard. So there was locks on both sides of the door, so neither person could go in, just like an adjoining room in a hotel. Same thing. So I'm like, okay, what else is not true? There had been a few break-ins. Andrew used to keep his key right there on the mantle, lock his bedroom door, and keep the key on the mantle, which is weird. And a lot of people say, well, that's just to signify that he knew who it was that, stole, some trolley tickets and some coins and I think a watch or something. I can't remember what it was. But the house was, he liked to lock his doors, but people were in and out of there all the time because he sold produce, he sold eggs, the family made vinegar, he owned a farm, he was involved in so many businesses. He was on the board of directors for multiple businesses, and he was a current vice president, even though he had mostly retired. Very big into real estate. This is why he's worth so much money, if that makes sense. Now, to be honest, we talked about what the town thought of Abby. When the word got out that he had been killed, I don't know why it's doing that. I'll see if I can fix it. I'm getting all fuzzy. The word had been out that he had been killed. That's worse. I'm going to disappear in a minute. Maybe that's a titch better. Let's see. Now I'm fuzzy. Okay, maybe that's better. Some of the people in the town, mostly the men that rented from him, said, somebody did a good deed. He's not well liked by the people that owed him money. He was well liked by the people that lost their job or were doing worse, financially, and he would lower the rent so they could afford to stay there. If he found out you were doing good, he'd raise your rent. So there you go, one way or the other, right? That he was a skimmer. No, he paid for a 19-week, all expenses paid grand tour of Europe for Lizzie. She had just gotten back like a year and a half before. Did the same for his sister. I mean, just so many things. You'll hear in movies where he only allowed them 2 dresses a piece per year. No, it was 2 full wardrobes, one in the spring and one in the fall. Full wardrobes, handmade, custom made, out full wardrobe. Okay, sealskin, furs and sealskin capes, which is why, if at all, she was getting that supposed poison. Well, it really is poison, but it was supposedly her. If you listen to pick that up at the drugstore the day before, again, that could be twisted either way. And if you listen to the trial transcripts, which I did ad nauseum, the way these people were questioned was incredible. I mean, just incredible. And it sounded to me in the testimony of the pharmacist that he didn't even know who he was talking to until one of the ladies said, that's one of the Borden girls. Well, there was 200 Borden families in that town. So they couldn't even say, he never pointed at her. He said, that woman walked into my pharmacy and tried to buy, what was it called? Prussic acid, which was 10 cents worth of prussic acid, which is a poison. However, if it was her, it was said that she was getting it not to clean a sealskin cape, but to keep moths off of it. They were winterizing, I guess. Hey, Donnie. They were winterizing furs to keep the moths out of it. I guess it's very similar to like mothballs maybe today. I don't know. But again, a lot of this wishy-washy evidence. So last week, we talked about that. Experts can be wrong for several different reasons. Either they don't know and they're pushing it. Like a lot. Hey, Susan. Like a lot of these people who are, they just pick up on something and run with it. And, these psychologists who say that it was very rare for anybody to be killed that way. Well, not very rare. Because what did we say last week? Do you guys remember? Do you guys remember this? The man from the train. Man from the train. Even though these 2 authors dug and dug and did all the research, right? They found 135 murders that fit their criteria. Now, the criteria of the man from the train was he would go in, he would use a hatchet, a weapon of opportunity that was there, chopping wood, on a farm, killing animals, whatever. If not theirs, their neighbors. In the Villisca axe murder, the axe was actually the neighbor's axe, and the neighbor had borrowed it from Mr. Moore a couple days before. So the neighbor borrowed it, and the killer returned it, which I thought was just kind of creepy. I don't know why stuff like that is just extra creepy, but it is. But this was 135 murders over a span of, I think, it was like 14 years, something like that. But they have fit a very tight criteria. Also, think about this. Think, if you will, how many old newspapers from small towns do you think are still in existence going back then? So this is just the stuff they could find from newspapers and journalists. Okay, how many didn't get reported or got reported, but the records were never kept? Not everything winds up on microfiche. You got young people don't know what microfiche is. Some used to be able to go to the library before the internet and look up old papers and read them on the screen and go back and dig and dig and dig. So how many, if they found 135 that fit the criteria, how many axe murders do you think there were up and down the East Coast and the Midwest? Okay, then we had this. And again, I'll tell you this, it was between 1898 and 1912, families across the country were bludgeoned in their sleep with the blunt side of an axe. Now, this guy used the blunt side, okay? That was one of the criteria he had to match. Also, no theft. Jewelry and valuables were left in plain sight. Bodies were piled together, faces covered with cloth. Some of these cases, like the infamous Villisca, Iowa murders, received national attention, but few people believed the crimes were related, and fewer still would realize that all of these families lived within walking distance to the train station. And again, that's the phrase right there that got me started on this. I was on a round table and people were asking about the Borden, she did it. And I said, wait a minute, how close is that house to a train station? It's not far, guys. Just saying, it's not far. I'm not saying this guy did it. I'm not saying that at all, because his MO doesn't fit. What I'm saying by pointing this out is that it's not rare. These people were hit in the head multiple times. Usually the kids were hit once, the parents were obliterated. They think that this guy had like parent issues or something. You always go for the guy first. That just makes sense. But he would always go back and kill them more after they were dead, because you could tell by the wounds not having any blood in them. The hearts had stopped. So even for then, there was a little bit of crime scene investigation going on, even though, it wasn't that great. And all these crime scenes were just obliterated fast, including the Borden. So my point is, it's not rare. So when a historian or somebody else comes out and says it would have had to been somebody that knew and hated them, because people just don't kill this way, strangers do kill strangers this way. Okay. We also, to further get the point, was the Axeman in New Orleans. Same stuff. He killed 50. He had 50 victims that survived. So we know of at least 100 that he did in New Orleans alone. Again, around the similar time frame here. Okay, similar, within 10, 20 years of all these murders. So all of this, that's not exactly rare. And that's just the ones that we can, bring up. And then there's this one. This one. This is Ms. Bertha Manchester. And this was done 6 days, or wait a minute, 5 days. Some say 6, some say 5. 5 days before the start of Lizzie Borden's trial. The day the jury was picked, this happened. The day the jury was picked. So they got to hear that this happened. But because they were sequestered, they didn't get to hear that the murderer was caught, so to speak. And I wanted to lean on that one just a titch, because this guy that they liked for this murder, actually, he went up for it. They found a coin that matched some of the things that were stolen in the Manchester house. Now, this woman was hit, I think it was 11 times in the head. The murderer waited 3 hours in the house for everybody else to leave. This woman was in there and I guess just wouldn't leave. So supposedly that's when he killed her. Waited around for a while after, supposedly in the house at least an hour after, did some other things, but did steal and stole a few things. One of the things that got him arrested was about 3 or 4 days after. One of the coins, it must have been a special kind of coin. I don't have the details on it, but they just pinned this guy. He was a Portuguese immigrant. Now, something I want you to remember from the New Orleans, and if you read A Man from the Train or talked about it or ever heard anything about it, they were always picking on the immigrants. That was any kind of crime or anything went on, it had to be one of them because it couldn't be somebody of social stature or anything like that. It had to be an immigrant or a transient. Okay? Well, that's the people that ride on the train, right? So this happened, but again, I don't know how much that would have weighed. You'd have to ask the jury how much this weighed on them. But do you think it's possible that an innocent guy got blamed for this and it was just a serial killer going through the town? It's possible, because how many people got hung and went to jail for life, or got hung in a tree without a trial, or pulled out of jail and, vigilante justice, right? And didn't do it. So many. With The Man on the Train, they talk about it all the time, all through the book. This guy just sat back, rode that train, and read the papers that this person was going down for this. This person was going to be hung and executed for the murders he did. It's part of it. So we can't throw it out completely that they wanted to get somebody caught quick because they wanted Lizzie Borden. I can't say that didn't happen. They did it in 1934 to Bonnie and Clyde, at least to Bonnie, right? So we know that can happen. Just saying, what if? I can't prove it one way or the other, but I can't say, oh, they'd never do that, because the more and more I dig in these trials and dig in these true crimes, it happens all the time. They wanted to get that guy. Maybe he did do it, but boy, that's weird. What are the chances? Two families, broad daylight, okay, a couple weeks apart from each other. In fact, the defense lawyer, I believe it was Jennings, said to the jury, Ms. Borden was here when Miss Manchester was being bludgeoned to death multiple times in the head with an axe or a hatchet. Did Miss Borden do that one too? There you go. All right. So reasonable doubt, as far as that goes, it's not rare. It's not common, but doggone it, in those 30 years, it seemed to be a lot more common than I thought. How about you guys? Ever get in trouble with the law after that? Renice, I did, interesting question. She did. Supposedly, now this one has documentation. Supposedly, she was accused of taking 2 framed portraits or something from a store, which would go along with, that they said she was a kleptomaniac. But I don't know the outcome of that, but that's the only one I know about. You know what I mean? So I'm not 100% sure. That could go either way. She might have been a klepto. To me, that was another one of these things that they brought, the heat, right? The guy that brought up the heat, and it wasn't all that hot. It was 80 degrees, and these people are wearing thick clothes neck to floor, but it wasn't the way he was putting it. And he's trying to push it because he's a prosecutor, he's a DA, and he's trying to push the fact that there's no way she would have been in that barn. It was too hot, She opened a couple of windows because it was hot, she said. And she sat there, she ate pears, and she went through a couple of boxes of what she called iron, because she knew there was some in there that had a hole in it that she could use for a sinker. The woman was going fishing with her cousins. This is something that she did from time to time. She hadn't been in a while, but she wanted to go. Emma was just getting back from her trip, and then it was time for her to go. And she had set it all up, time off from, teaching Sunday school and the charities and things, and she were in all the clubs she was in. She was A lot more of a socialite than people thought. She just didn't get to socialize with the people she wanted to socialize with, if that makes sense. But she was in there looking for sinkers, and she was going. She did have a fishing pole and line, and she wanted to get some sinkers because she had lost all of hers the last time she went. And she was going to buy new line, and she didn't want to have to buy sinkers too. She tried to hang on to her money too, you see. So it kind of ran in the family. So here we go. The next one, these are the Bordens. You have Andrew, Abby, Emma, and Lizzie. Now, Andrew, of course, we've talked about him. He was 70 years old at the time of the murder. Abby was 64. I think she was 37 when she married Andrew, and they had been married over 30 years. A lot of people will tell you these stories, or they'll have a show on their podcast or whatever, and they'll tell you that there was a marriage that was loveless, and it was this and that, and Emma and Lizzie and Abby never got along. They were married 30 years. Lizzie was 2 when this woman became her stepmother. Okay. Emma never called her mother because she remembered her mother. She was around 10, 14 or something like that when they got married. She always called her Mrs. Borden. Lizzie called her mother, until recently. And that whole thing came up with the house. Abby's sister couldn't finish paying her mortgage. She was going to wind up in the streets. She went to Andrew and pretty much, begged him, please help her. She did. They wanted to keep it to themselves. They did tell Emma and Lizzie, and basically Emma was the one who leaned forward and said, you should do the same for us. We should have a house. So he said, let's see how you do. At 30, they didn't know how to do much. They spent money, willy-nilly, you can imagine. And he gave them the house to learn how to be landlords and start their own future, their own career. They didn't like it. He wound up buying back that house for $5,000, okay, which was buku money back then. And that way they'd have a nest egg. He was very concerned with their future and trying to teach them to be tight with your money because he knew how things could flip fast. And I don't really blame him for that. But I don't think he was the miser people said he was, because I seen a lot of nice things that he did. But again, the house could have been nicer. It could have been a nicer place. They could have had more amenities, but he was okay with it. He didn't believe in wasting it. And I'm not really sticking up for him. I'm just trying to be honest. He was like kind of both ways. But I think if you put anybody under a microscope, you're going to get dirt or maybe misunderstand something they did. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. So Andrew was 70. Abby was 64 at the time of her death. Emma was 40 during the murders. And Lizzie had just turned 32. Okay? If that gives you sense. Yeah, that's it. And I feel the same way. Most of what I know about the case isn't even true. This is what I'm saying. Because I just think there should be a law. I'll never forget my mom was in advertising and she did a lot of different things. Decorator, floral designer, wonderful woman. My dad was into in advertising. So I learned a lot about advertising. And I can remember my mom telling me something I was reading, and she said, well, they can't put it in print if it isn't true. It has to be true. It has to have integrity. I can't go in and say that this TV is the best TV you've ever seen, because it might not be. So I have to find a different way to word that, want people to buy this, television without lying. She was trying to have integrity in advertising. Can you imagine that? And as I grow up, I'm like, yeah, no, not everything. They can lie here, lie here. I think we all know that how much the news lies, and they'll come back and show you something, and it's not even that thing, and then they come back and apologize on a scroll 3 days later, and nobody even sees it, and everybody thinks that was true. Same thing happened here. A lady wrote a book. I think it was in 27, and she was doing a play, so she wrote a book to kind of boost the play she knew she was going to release, and she made up all kind of stuff. Just absolutely out of whole cloth, just to make it more sinister and more intriguing. Don't think people didn't talk a bunch of stuff back then, because they did. Okay, so there's that. Next one, this is Lizzie. This is actually her high school and she was in high school, her portrait. You know, I think, a lot of people say, oh, she was this, she was hideous, she could never get a guy. Listen, I've seen a lot of pictures of women back then. That had nothing to do with it. Her dad didn't keep her from getting married. It was just who you could socialize with in the town, okay? And within your social stature, you couldn't marry up and you couldn't marry below. That kind of cuts things a little thin, doesn't it? That's why I said she should have just got on that love boat. I see Hercule Poirot all the time going on these trips to India and all this other stuff. All these rich people just, they're traveling, they're going to Egypt, they're going all over the place during this time. And I'm wondering, why the hell did she just get a train and never come back? Just get as much as she could and just go. I don't understand why she stuck around. There's some questions. I have some questions, but none of them point to guilt or innocence. It's like back and forth. We're just trying to get to the facts. You know what I mean? Yeah, yep, yep. Air conditioned, everything else. It's nuts. I've watched the Amish people working in fields wearing all black. I mean, you just come conditioned to it, right? So there's that. All right, so that's the house. So a couple of the other things that in last week we talked about was the kleptomania. I don't know because there's no evidence to prove it, but who would know? I mean, if she's going to steal it and the clerk is just going to write it down on the credit tab, I mean, how would you know? Because it doesn't say next to it, she stole this, whatever, or she stole a cup, or she stole, sewing thread, whatever. They just put it on the thing. So I don't know. And there's nobody in the town that says this. This is all later on coming out of other books that she had some kind of psychosis going on. It's odd. So if it doesn't go all the way back, I tend to think, maybe it's not so true. I don't know. Seems like an agenda to me. And again, if she could have stole the Empire State Building, doesn't mean she killed her family. Does that make sense? All right. We talked about the house being stifling. No, it wasn't. It was a perfectly fine house for where it was. It was a very modern house. A lot of people there didn't have houses. They did boarding houses. They did apartments. They did kind of like a transient thing. They were coming in and working. These people had a really nice house. They were very high on the social ladder. They just weren't as high as the people on the hill. Does that make sense? Yeah, she had a running account. Exactly, Vixen Doe. Well, her dad did. They didn't. Any account was paid by Andrew. And that's the way they did back then when your daughters lived with you. You provided for them, and they did not work. In fact, it was frowned upon that he had bought that house for them to become landlords, because that's just something that wasn't done back then. And he was trying to push them up to say, but my daughters can do this. They're Bordens. Of course they can own real estate and do these things. That was very frowned upon back then. So he really kind of pushed it to the next level with them. Pretty cool. Yeah. They don't carry cash. That's right. Mm-hmm. So there's that. We talked about she destroyed a book of Fall River Tragedy from being printed. No. There's copies available today. The troubled family dynamic, again, that's trying to victimize the victims, to demonize the victims, rather, to make them almost make it look to us like they had it coming, and again, we can't really find anything on that. There's no evidence to prove that. That Lizzie was a strange character. Not really. Not if you talk to, to the Sunday school people. She was always cooking meals for the less fortunate, always working in charities, because that's what women did back then. And she was very devoted. She was in the Women's Temperance League, the suffragette, all of it. She was constantly, involved. She stayed busy. She was very rarely at home. This is another thing you hear. She didn't eat breakfast with the family. And, that's a little practice that she had later on. Like the family would eat, she'd come down and eat, And here's another one. You want to hear this? Here's something I dug up, and I finally found a couple of references to it that really convinced me that it was true. We hear a lot about the mutton stew, right? In fact, if you go to the bed and breakfast right now, Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast right now, you can have that, what they say is the breakfast that they had, which was cold mutton stew, supposedly 5 days on the sideboard, no refrigeration. I know, little monkey. Monkey's on my lap. It's woke up. So, and Johnny cakes and cookies, which is weird. Okay. Not true. I listened to the transcripts, and Bridget Sullivan herself, during her testimony, said that that mutton stew was less than 24 hours old. She had made it the day before, as per instructed, that they had eaten swordfish the day before that was left over from the night before, and they thought it was the swordfish that made him sick. Now, here's the thing. Summer sweats, summer complaint. Because it was hot and no refrigeration, very rare, maybe an icebox, many people got sick in the summertime. And that's what all the doctors were talking about. There were multiple accounts of people having this sickness throughout the town because of the heat. It was hot. You know, we saw all of the weather reports and the newspapers from back then. They stated that it was 70 in the early day, and it got as hot as 80 degrees. Okay, which is hot without air conditioning. You got to think about it. But it was not a mutton stew that had been left over for 5 days. That is total garbage. Yeah, fish will do that to you. Yep, Johnny cakes are just pancakes, right? Yep. I had to look it up though. I figured I knew you were going to know that one, Anna. But see, that's just another one. But now you go and you hear the story, that he was such a miser. He made them eat this, stew 5 days in a row, and everybody got sick from that. No, they were sick before. In fact, Abby had gone to the doctor before. She brought the doctor, Bowen, over from across the street to take a look at Andrew. He chewed him away. He was fine. He just knew that he had a little food poisoning. He was going to be fine. He was going to pay an extra bill for house call. He said that. So, there it is. It's just, again, he's being frugal. So it's kind of funny, when you look at all that, and you see all these people, oh God, it was hot. It was so hot. It was, like the prosecutor said, on this hot day, in this hot town, in this hot country, during this hot, outbreak or this heat wave, there's no way she went to the barn. That's where it started, because he was trying to break down her alibi. There you go. Yeah, fading from the heat and all those clothes. That's right. So here's the Borden house. I don't know how good you guys can see this. In fact, I'm going to put it up a little bigger and just talk behind it so maybe you can see it. And I know you can't see all the writing, but this is the first floor. And I just wanted you to see how it was lined up. If you see where the front door is in the opening here, you actually have to walk through the front room, okay, through the door, go into the sitting room. Then you got another door you go through. See all these doors? Okay, then you have to turn, and then the back exit is at the very last back part here. Okay, and that's where the back stairs are. Okay, then you have this one. Same thing. See it? There you go. Second floor. I'm sorry. Right here. You can see it right here. Same thing. So in order to get up the back stairs, you can get into the main bedroom where the Borden slept, and all of that. And then there was a little sewing room there and a guest room. And then on the other side, you went up that stairway and you went into there. So you couldn't even get to the rooms if the doors were locked. Right? There was a drawing room, peasants, right? Right. So that's kind of the layout. Now, this is the Fall River Police Department. I thought this was really cool. This was taken in front of the armory there. It still stands today. But one of the reasons this is so significant, actually, this was taken the year of the murders. Did you get your way back, Lynn? I'm glad you found your way back. It was an accident. Very good, Glenn. Very good play on words. But something a lot of people don't know, that there was a big, like a policeman's picnic. And most of the policemen were at this picnic, so you couldn't even get, any help, this day. So it was very, very straggled how everything went down. Now, I'm only going to take you a little bit further here. But as far as all the fiction, just the made up rumors and everything else, people don't even realize that this is not the murder weapon, folks. at this time, you can go, I think it's at the Fall River, it's either at the Historical Society or one of the museums out there. I can't remember which one because it's kind of split up with the evidence and what's left over where, because there's so many different museums and historical societies. And then you've got the bed and breakfast there, and they have some things there too. I'm not sure where the hatchet is now, but this is actually a roofing hatchet. There's a flat back, almost like a roofing hammer, but this one's a hatchet. And you can see the little notch here in the blade where you would, pull the nails out. Does that make sense? So did you steal it from me? That's good. That's a good one though. Yeah, it's fine. Keystone Cops. It did look like that, Ted. So this isn't even the murder weapon. Just prove it wasn't. It was too big. It didn't fit. I don't want to say it was too big. I don't want to misquote here. It did not fit the holes in the skull. They weren't satisfied. They tried like mad to make it fit, but it didn't. It also didn't have a handle. There was actually the only blood. There was one or two hairs found on it. The only thing they could do back then is they couldn't type blood, but they could type it from human to animal. And the only blood on this hatchet was animal. There were 3 or 4 other hatchets and things like that. You're chopping wood, you're killing animals here. It's a homestead. But none of them had human blood on them. The murder weapon was never found. They don't even have a murder weapon. Okay? So what do they have? I think that's last. Let me make sure here. Yeah. Okay, that's where I want to stop there. They don't even have a murder weapon. So we went through all that. Now, the prussic acid, like I said, was supposedly bought to keep off moths. And there was another piece of evidence I found interesting after digging. Now, again, I've been doing this for 9 weeks. And I didn't just read one author or read, this author or whatever. I tried to get a little bit of everything and people that were kind of open-minded that were just telling me facts. If you opened your thing with, something that wasn't true, I realized you didn't dig back fast enough. It could have been just a mistake, but I didn't want to take a chance they were going to give me wrong misinformation, right? So I was trying to dig, and I found out that in the sitting room, okay, was a table with some books. One of the books there was very much like a medical encyclopedia, which a lot of people had then, because, you wanted to know what was going on, with you, and, different things you could use, might have herbal cures or whatever in it, or, explain the different things that would go on in every day. In there, they had a list of poisons, and they were trying to make a point that Lizzie Borden was guilty because the spine on the book was broke to where when you open a book to one spot a lot, the spine breaks to where if you just shake the book, sometimes it just opens to that spot, and it opened to poisons. So they were trying to make a point that it had to be Lizzie. She was the one who was trying to buy poison to kill the family. And poison is a woman's weapon. This is what they were trying to push. Well, hold on a second. Let's look at this. Who went the day before to the doctor and to 2 or 3 other neighbors talking about that they felt like they had been poisoned? It was Abby. Miss Abby was her stepmother. Okay. And they were going around. She thought that it was the milk that they had been brought because they got their milk from the dairy guy. And, everybody was saying, well, we all got milk from him and we're not, sick. Some people were and some weren't. And that's how they traced it back to possibly the swordfish, which is what Dr. Borden thought. But again, not only was there poisons listed there, all of these things, that might have been poisonous and still to this day are used for other things. Bleach is a poison. Ammonia is a poison. You're not going to drink it, or you shouldn't. Tide Pods, poison if you eat them. So it's all this different, but they're trying to push a narrative. See? Ted, that was Abraham Lincoln's mom. The cow had eaten, what was the name of it? Silver something weed. It poisoned the milk. Her cousins got it. Got the poison. She went to go live with the cousins to help them. Drank the milk and got it too. There you go. So just because a book is open, doesn't mean that Lizzie did it because she was looking up poisons and she could do, I'm pretty sure that everybody back then knew that there was poisons. And, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. But it fits a narrative. And I think a lot of this got pushed that way. Does that make sense? Okay, so now that you guys have written down what you think, if you have, think if you think it's, Lizzie did it, guilty, not guilty, we know the evidence we have. So what is the evidence we have? We have 2 dead bodies that were obviously bludgeoned with a sharp object. Could have been a hatchet. An axe would have been too large back then. The double-bladed axe, that's pretty much, mostly there was one-bladed, but still the most popular out there, right? Hot toddies tonight. Yeah, I've got rose mint tea with sugar in the raw and ice water is what I got. So that just burns me when people take a little piece like that and run with it like it's a fact and it's not a fact. Oh, good, red wine. Nice. There you go. Cheers to you, darling. Can you have a sip for me, will you? So, I wanted to tell you about that book in case you ever heard it, but think about that. Families would be looking up different chemicals to use to treat certain things. They didn't have dry cleaners back then. If you had an expensive fur, you had to keep it from getting moth-eaten. You'd have to be able to clean it. There was a lot going on in the house being renovated, and the painting. Here's another thing you're going to hear about. She burnt the dress. They burnt clothes every day. That's how they got rid of stuff. There was nobody that came and picked up your garbage. There were certain things. It was like the metal guy that would come by and pick up stuff and take it to the dump or sell it, to one of the mills or one of the factories to recycle or whatever. They didn't call it that back then. They called it making stuff out of other things. And they burnt anything it could be, disposed of by burning. That's what they did. And they burnt clothes all the time. Now, the dress that you hear about, and you're going to hear it in the documentary here that we're going to watch, she had a dress that had been hanging in kind of like one of the back rooms there because she was trying to get the paint off of it. Now, she didn't want to throw out the whole thing. She thought maybe it could be saved or maybe some of the material could be used. They also sewed. She was upstairs, in the morning putting lace on another dress. A lot of women sewed and put, embellishments and stuff on their own clothes. That dress had been sitting there for a while. Now, the contractor and the painters all said that Lizzie went through, did not realize that the stairwell or wherever it was that they had been painting brown was wet, and her dress scooted against it. And she got paint all over the dress. So she was also looking up how to get that paint off. Maybe that's why the spine was broken, because everything was chemicals she was looking at there. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm just guessing. I'm spitballing. But everybody testified that was there with the painters and the contractor that yes, she went by in a blue dress and she got paint all over it, and they'd seen it hanging and felt bad about it. Of course, it was something they were hired for. And they, felt like it was their fault. But she burnt that dress in front of 2 other people, and her sister told her to do it. Why don't you just get rid of that dress? I mean, you're just sitting around bored. You're talking 12 hours a day. You're sitting in this house. Can't leave. Can't do anything. So they were just doing stuff. And I think she, but everybody tried to say, oh, she burnt the dress, so that must have been the dress with the blood on it. Well, you can't tell brown paint from blood. And you're a police officer or you're, somebody that's supposed to be in this business, you probably don't need to be in the business. And it's really weird because during the Man from the Train book, there were 2 cases where they actually almost hung a guy. One was they almost hung a guy because he had paint on his overhauls, and it took them months in a lab to figure out, whatever lab they sent it to, in quotes, to tell that wasn't blood and it was paint. And it just barely saved his life because they were saying it was blood. The police that were there in that town couldn't tell by looking at it that it was paint and not blood. And a guy almost swung for it. He didn't do it. And it was funny that the similar thing happened to Lizzie and also another person in that. So it seems like during this time, and it was all within 5 years of all this. So it seems like at that time they even had a hard time even eyeing something and seeing that it's blood or not blood. This is brown paint, obviously not blood, you know, and it wasn't coagulated blood on a dark blue dress. It was brown paint. I think it would have stained it dark and then, started turning. Yeah, it's just silly. And it's all brought up, and it's, again, circumstantial evidence proves absolutely nothing. This is what they had. Okay? You asked me about the other evidence. Eyewitness account. Eyewitness accounts is the timing for certain things, like the 9 o'clock a.m. murder of Abby. And now you've got people saying an hour to 2 hours. That's a big difference. An hour to 2 hours between killings. Really? If you look at this, your timeline is based on witness statements. And we all know witness statements can be off 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour sometimes, right? So if the timeline can be off, that means the alibis can be off. Now, how did they state? I said it last week. Why Abby? They figured Abby was dead first. This is what they did. After finding the bodies are discovered. There was an autopsy done right then, right there in the house. A kind of impromptu autopsy. Basically, they took the stomach contents out of both bodies. They laid them right there. They put canvas on the table in the parlor, laid them right out there, and cut them open right there. Sent the stomach contents to Harvard. Okay? And Abby's was less digested than Andrew's. And that's how they timed it. About an hour's difference. About an hour difference. No liver temperatures. And the puddle of blood under her head was just starting to have a film on the top, where Andrew's was not. And that's how they timed and said between an hour, 90 minutes, and 2 hours. That's what you're going to hear the most of it. Does that make sense? There's your evidence. That's all they have. That's all they have. That's it. For that trial, that's all they had. They don't have Lizzie's statement. She never got on the stand. They had an inquiry with her, but it was thrown out. Do you know why it was thrown out? Because she had I don't know how many policemen with her doctor, and then you've got the prosecutor, you got the mayor coming over, you got everybody coming over. Half of them said that they were shocked that she wasn't acting more emotional because she was so stoic. Okay? But somehow within that 15, 20-minute frame, they felt like they needed to give her a huge dose of morphine to calm her down. So which was true. This is all police, law statements, and the mayor and a doctor and everybody else is in the room. How can they both be true? But she was given the morphine. And then she was given the interrogation. And that's why it was thrown out. And that woman was on that stuff every day. She was in jail. Every day in court. So if people say that she was hesitant to answer, she was emotionless or too emotional or anything else, she's on morphine. You give me morphine and ask me questions, let me tell you something. If I'm awake, it's huge doses too. I don't know how she stood up. And in the heat, and in those dresses with the tight lace, I'm surprised she didn't go off kill everybody in the courtroom if she was like that. Or pass out and go to sleep through the whole thing. This woman had to go on a train and travel out of town because they had no female guards. Every day, train out, go out to New Bedford to the courthouse. Every day watched. Everything she wore, every move she made. She covered her face with a fan just to try to have, some privacy. Yeah, there you go. So there's that. I wanted to catch you all up on that to give you back on the thing because it's going to start coming hard and fast now, and we're going to finish this up. But there's your evidence: two bodies, Abby and Andrew. You got the blood stains, got the blood splatter evidence. You got a hatchet with animal blood on it. It has absolutely nothing to do with this case. Should have never even been brought to the courtroom. Because they knew before they brought it in that it didn't have any human blood on it. Well, she broke the handle off. Really? What about the blood that would have been under the handle or around the seam where the handle goes in? There was no blood there? There's blood on the handle, but not on the hatchet, not in that little groove. Doesn't make any sense. We know now by looking back that doesn't make any sense. Right? Yeah, it's not truth serum. That's right. Fix it. So it's like, she was sluggish to answer. Okay, give me that amount of morphine, intravenously shot into me, and then start asking me questions, and then, bitch afterwards that I wasn't, I slurred my words or I was hesitant to answer or something. It doesn't make any sense. So here is this little ditty. I think it's kind of cool. Here's the one that I did for you just to get us in the mood and get us started right before, because this time you'll be able to see it without the drags. And boy, if it doesn't play now, I'm going right down Chrome headquarters tonight. But let's see how this is. Just get you in the mood. Now, keep in mind too when you hear this song that after Lizzie was found innocent, by a jury of her peers, all 12 men at that time. And again, if people tell you that she was not found guilty because she was a woman, there was nothing in the papers at that time. There doesn't seem to be anything in the scuttlebutt. There was definitely in the defense's, in their defense, in both their opening and closing statements. And again, I listened to them. That could you see a woman of this stature doing this? Again, think about this. We've become desensitized. We say, she was hit 19 times in the head. Okay, somebody's got a hatchet. Now, I was going to show you like a gif of a guy chopping wood, but I think you'll get the idea when I say, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're hitting somebody in the head. 6. You see where I'm going with this? I honestly would get tired after a couple. The adrenaline pumping. But if you were a serial killer, or a killer like the one that killed Miss Manchester right down the street in Fall River, the day the jury was picked for the trial for Lizzie Borden, you keep counting. This is absolutely devastating to think that somebody could do this to somebody, but we've become desensitized by saying 19 times in the head. Abby Borden was hit 17 to 19 times in the back of her head, most of them in the back of the head and the neck. The first one came at her. She saw her kill her because it hit her here and almost, it's called the flat wound, because it was hit here and almost took her ear off. Then she turned and fell. I got another zinger for you. I'm going to tell you right after this intro. You ain't going to believe this one. Here we go.
When she saw what she had done, gave her father 41.
nothing you hear and only one half that you see of the Ellen Post. There you go. And it did play good, Ted. I'm so proud of it. That's got like 11 different layers on it. So if you would believe how long it takes me to do this. But I thought that would put us in the mood. I also wanted you to hear that little song again. Because something that makes me just ill when I think about it is once Lizzie was, found innocent in a, court of law and handed all the evidence, they didn't bother looking for anybody else. She moved up that hill. She bought herself a house, her and her sister, who stood by her side through the entire trial. Bridget left. She went to Montana, followed her, found out what she did. She lived on a farm. She wound up going blind in her later life and kind of senile at the end. So if you hear anything about she did a deathbed confession, or there's one story out there that it's in 3 books that as she was dying, she went, Lizzie, and then died. Bullshit. She was incoherent. She was completely senile, gone. Blind and everything else, and she had dementia. You imagine what you will. But she went off to Montana and never spoke about this trial again. There you go. So interesting, right? But when she went up to this house, now she kind of stuck in everybody's face. I can't tell you why she stayed. Hello, Steve. I love you, darling. I can't tell you why. And guys, if you could share this out, it'd be great because, if anybody's interested in this, this is the truth as I could find it. All right. There's no playing which way here. We're just looking at the facts, just the facts, ma'am. It's like Dragnet, right? So, she's up there in this house and she had, quite the life. She did the thing. She went back to church. When she sat down in church, everybody sat on the other side. Wouldn't sit with her. She was completely socially ostracized. Why she stayed in this town, I don't know. But maybe she stayed because she was innocent and she wanted to stick it to him. Maybe it was the only home she knew. Me personally, all that money, I'd been gone. I've been in Hawaii or Jamaica or something, but that's me. I don't know why she did things, she never said. But daily, children would circle her house and sing that song daily. She was pulled away from talking to little kids. She loved kids. She taught Sunday school. She'd give them candy. She'd buy them gifts. She helped out families that needed it. Support a lot of kids. Sent kids to paid for their schooling. Sent them to college. Certain families. It's just she's been just torn up. And I think that anybody, why would you go through that kind of punishment hearing kids, singing that song outside your window on a daily basis? Why would you put yourself through that? But she was kind to the kids, and I guess maybe she thought that if she just kept being her, that eventually people would change their opinion of her. But I think people can be pretty hardcore sometimes when they have an opinion about somebody, and they're just not going to listen. She said in a letter that she wrote that all her good friends turned against her. Not only did they, she didn't mind so much that they went to the trial and told the truth. It was how they treated her after the fact, because while the trial was going on, everybody seemed to be on her side and rallied around her. And then once she was found innocent, they socially ostracized her. She might as well had that big, what was the name of that thing, the red letter, where they had to wear the, I forget the name of the whole movie, but, it's awful. It's just awful what happened. But here we go. We'll watch this little documentary. I'm going to stop it throughout and, say little things. But if you hear something that somebody says and it doesn't fit the facts that I just told you, point it out. It might be something, I missed or somebody else missed. Okay. But here we go. Check this out. This is the second half of the documentary we're starting. Scarlet Letter. Thank you, Glenn. That was it. That was a rough one, wasn't it? There's another woman that stood up for herself, right? It's crazy what some of these things do. Yeah, it's a good story though, right? Yeah. Her name was ruined for history. Well, tonight we're trying to give her a hard break here, Aunt Edna, because I think she was. If she did, I'll tell you toward the end. I don't want to say yet now, but here we go. I'm so glad these are playing. Yes, victory.
Hard reality was slowly soaking in. Every member of the household had an ironclad alibi except Lizzie. The unthinkable was now considered. Except in whispers, no one had courage to pose the question, did Lizzie Borden murder her father and stepmother? That afternoon, one of the more macabre events took place in the Borden home. Shortly after 3 o'clock, the doctors placed wicker, muslin cloth, and canvas on the dining table, and the bodies were autopsied. It was determined that Abby was killed about 9 o'clock that morning, and Andrew 1 or 2 hours later. In other words, Abby was dead at the time Lizzie was explaining her stepmother's absence.
Okay, quick comment. You heard what they said. It was a little earlier. Okay? They were called in about 11:15. That's when the doctor was sent for across the street. Lizzie sent Bridget across the street, go get the doctor. I need a doctor. My father is hurt. Okay? She goes across the street. That doctor's out. There's a doctor next door to him, and 2 behind her, but they're Catholic doctors. They don't go get them. Again, this is your social thing in 1893, Fall River, Massachusetts. You just waited for your doctor. So that's another thing. He eventually did show up. They did the autopsies right there. Here's your zinger. For 130 years, we've been seeing these pictures of Andrew Borden on the couch, right? And Abby laying between the dresser and the bed in the guest room where Uncle James Moore stayed the night before and was supposed to stay that night. So she was fixing it up, making the bed, tidying, that kind of thing. The crime scene photos you have seen all this time are not crime scene photos. They're not. They're staged. Those photos were taken after the autopsies, and they put the bodies back, set them back the way they thought they were. And you've been looking at these pictures all this time and thought that they were actual crime scene photos, that the bodies were not touched. This is the way they laid. From what I understand, Abby Borden was kind of half under the bed, like she was almost trying to crawl away. Now, I don't understand that. It seems to me that the bed must have been moved, and then the killer must have put it back over her, because after that first blow, maybe the second blow, she was gone. She was gone. So how could she have crawled away from the killer? So the bed must have been moved, and maybe the killer moved the bed back. Just my guess, only my opinion. But those are not crime scene photos. Those photos were taken by the photographer at like 3:30 something that afternoon. And it's been proven by the shadows coming in the window and everything else. They were absolutely stated fact. The photographer took them at 3:30. Those were staged photos. So you're not even looking at the way they fall. So if you've got people looking at the way Abby fell and said it was impossible for this, but that's not even where she was. They lined up the blood as best as possible, moved the bed and everything else. Weird, right? That one blew me away. I was like, holy crap. All right, back to it. That surprised me.
After darkness fell on the House of Locks, John Morse slept without a lamplight in the same room where Mrs. Borden had been hacked to death a few hours before. Lizzie and Emma, who had returned from Fairhaven, also slept without a light, as did Miss Russell, who slept in Mr. and Mrs. Borden's room.
Can you believe that? Everybody just stayed in the house.
Something about Lizzie and said something about Emma. I mean, let's face it, if Emma didn't do it, if Lizzie didn't do it, Bridget didn't do it, then there was some lunatic out there with an axe who could reappear. And yet there seemed to be no fear of that.
Andrew and Abby's bloody clothes had been removed and taken to the cellar. Their bodies still lay on the dining room table. Shortly after midnight, a policeman observed Emma and Lizzie going down to the basement. Lizzie was carrying a slop pail, and Emma held the light. Lizzie disappeared into the darkness and returned a short time later. Police never questioned them about the incident. The bodies lay in the dining room for another 2 days until the August heat demanded burial.
Can you believe that?
A couple of nights after the murder, Uncle John, who had been named as a suspect by several newspapers, tried to sneak out of the Borden house to go to the post office. He was recognized by some of the thousands that were gathered there. A lynch mob of 1,000 or so surrounded him, but miraculously, he was saved by police.
I sent for officers to clear the street, and then the mayor and I saw Lizzie and Emma and Mr. Morse in the parlor. Mayor Coughlin asked that the members of the family remain in the house for a few days, and he offered to them police protection and suggested that they send persons for the mail rather than go to the post office for it. Lizzie then said, "What? Is there anyone suspected in this house?" Mayor Coughlin then said, "Well, I regret very much to say, Miss Borden, but you are suspected." With that, Miss Emma spoke up and said, "We have tried to keep it from her as long as we could."
The funeral took place on the morning of August 6th. The bodies were laid in 2 black cloth-covered caskets in the sitting room where Mr. Borden was killed. The bodies of the victims were laid in the caskets with the mutilated portions of the head turned down so that the cuts could not be noticed. Lizzie stood beside her father's coffin, sobbed, and kissed him on the lips. The funeral was private, that is, only a very few of the immediate friends were asked to accompany the remains to the cemetery. But from 11 o'clock until 11:30, when the funeral procession of 11 hacks and 2 hearses started on its way, there were immense crowds of people lining every sidewalk. As the procession winded its way along North Main Street, many old associates of Mr. Borden were seen to raise their hats. During the afternoon, medical examiners held another autopsy on the bodies of the murdered people at the receiving vault. The doctors severed the poor, mutilated heads from both the bodies, and Dr. Dolan took possession of the ghastly objects.
Now, they made that sound real nice. I'm sorry to leave this picture up there, but that's pretty bad. This is what they did. They snuck off to the graveyard after the burial, gave the bodies to the doctor right there. The doctor hacks off the heads of these 2 people. They take him back to the college where he was. I don't want to say Harvard because I don't think this one was from Harvard, but took him back to the university, boiled them to get everything off of them, and then put them in a bag. And the first time anybody sees them is at the courtroom when I believe it was the prosecutor. I could be wrong on that. But he's, exclaiming and directing and, pointing to all the evidence they got. They got basically 2 skulls and a hatchet that didn't do it. Knocks the bag over. The skulls roll out of the bag, and Lizzie faints dead away in the courtroom. And I think that's what got her acquitted. That's what got her, because she reacted the way they thought a female should react at that time. Oddly enough, I've read the transcripts on that, and it's astounding how they went, okay, she didn't know about this. Obviously, she couldn't have done it if she can't even look at the skulls and she faints. If I had to pick a moment, that would be the moment. And the fact that they had 0 evidence. Okay? There you go. Pretty awful, huh?
The glaring white skulls with great rents where the murderous axe had crushed then were added to Dr. Dolan's collection of evidence, which could not be properly called circumstantial.
Don't look, Sarah.
E.H. Porter.
That's poor Andrew.
It occurred to someone 5 days after the murders that the clothes Lizzie wore the day of the murders should be examined for bloodstains. Lizzie obliged and gave authorities a beautiful, clean dress, even though she said she had spent 20 to 30 minutes in a suffocatingly hot loft that was covered in thick dirt and dust. Lizzie hired Andrew J. Jennings, a highly competent Fall River attorney.
Now, it is almost impossible that this frightful work could have been done without the clothes of the person who did it being bespattered with blood. Then came Lizzie Borden, dressed in the same clothes she wore before the killing. This, together with the
Sorry about the
improbability
sound.
that
It's not me,
anyone
guys.
could do such a piece of work, makes the suspicion seem altogether irrational.
5 days after the murder, an inquest was held.
Now, an inquest is a judicial proceeding held to determine.
This is just to let you know, this is an old VHS. This was like from the 90s, I think, maybe a little earlier. And the person who did this is going to fix this real quick here. You can see I'm trying to adjust it. So just bear with us and we'll jump.
Whether or not a crime has been
We'll jump
committed.
through it.
And it was a formality in the case of the Borden murders. But within a few days of those murders, they had a proceeding called the inquest, and Knowlton examined Lizzie. Her lawyer was there, but not permitted to sit with her. He was outside the room. It was a closed proceeding, which is important in terms of a later event of the trial. But Knowlton took her up and down and over hill and down dale and around corners and back through the side streets of her testimony and nailed her down into about 50 contradictions.
District Attorney Knowlton believed he had what was tantamount to a confession from Lizzie. Now, finally, it was out in the open, and it was on everyone's lips. Lizzie Borden was suspected of killing her mother and father.
Every morning,
Lizzie was
Ted.
arrested and jailed in Bristol County, only a short distance from where her ancestor John Borden was jailed in 1684 for refusing to pay taxes.
Of course, Lizzie was incarcerated in the Taunton jail because there was no female matron in the prison here, and they could not incarcerate her with men. There have been questions as to whether or not she was given special privileges. We do know that several very prominent people in this area called on Lizzie, and they brought her little trinkets, little things that she might like. She did not eat prison food, and it's a rather large dinner pail, so apparently had quite an appetite. And if you look at photographs of Lizzie before and after the trial, you'll see that she did put on a considerable amount of weight, and the trial did age her.
The emerging feminist movements and religious organizations attacked the prosecution and persecution of Lizzie Borden.
Me too, Vixen.
The hardest thing for me to stand here is the night, when there is no light. They will not allow me a candle to read by, and to sit in the dark all the evenings is very hard. But I do not want any favors that are against the rules. Lizzie Borden.
Massachusetts had not executed a woman since the Revolutionary War. That execution scarred Massachusetts' Puritan conscience to the core. The murderess, Bathsheba Spooner, was hanged in 1778. An autopsy revealed she was 5 months pregnant. She remains the only woman ever executed in the state's history.
Marshall Hilliard. Dear Sir, if the Bordens were murdered by someone in the house, the hatchet could have been concealed on the persons and afterwards hid in the caskets without fear of detection. Try a muzzled bloodhound. Unsigned letter.
At a preliminary hearing to determine if there was probable cause to believe Lizzie Borden committed the murders, her attorney
Welcome,
Andrew
Gene.
Jennings presented a unique, if not prophetic, argument.
This girl has got at most 10 or 15 minutes to commit the crime and conceal the weapon. If she had time to kill her mother and clean the bloodstains from the garments, she did not have time to clean up the evidence of her work downstairs. Is there any smell of burnt clothing? No.
Jennings must have been unaware of an event that Lizzie's friend Alice Russell observed a few days after the
There's
murder.
the back
I
porch
went
with
in
the
the
screen
kitchen
door,
and saw
guys.
Lizzie standing by the stove, Emma by the sink. Lizzie had a dress, and I asked her what she was going to do with it, and Lizzie said she was going to burn it. It was all covered with paint. I said nothing and went out. When I came in the room again, Lizzie was tearing the dress. I said I wouldn't let anybody see me doing that. There were no officers in the house at the time. I said, I'm afraid that's the worst thing you could have done was to burn that dress. I've been asked about your dresses. And she said, why did you let me do it?
Mr. Knowlton, honored sir, it seems strange to me that it has never occurred to anyone that perhaps Lizzie Borden was naked when she committed the murder. She could easily and quickly wash herself. That is my idea, for I think she is the one. Yours respect, Clara Brown, Boston.
Now that Clara Brown's letter is where that comes from. That's where they got the idea for it. It was mentioned in the trial as a possible, way she could have done it. But it came from this letter from a young girl. And there was many books based on that. And all it was just an idea. There's also another idea that she was covered in something called gossamer. Now, this is very much like, if you look it up, they describe it as almost like a gossamer could be a spider web, but it's made, it almost looks like a bridal veil, and it's something you can put over yourself, very much like, like the beekeeper hats and stuff like that. That's what it is. It's supposed to be waterproof. There's a lot of theories out there that she could have done that and then burnt that too. It would have burnt very quickly. But there's no any sales slips or anything like that. It's kind of hard to get. She could have got it on her grand trip. Again, I've heard that, but there's nothing to prove that she ever had it or anything was like that was bought in that city or ordered. Something like that you would have had to order, unless she got it on her grand tour a couple of years before and she knew she was going to do this, which I find strange. But it's just another idea you might hear out there. There's no basis for it. It's just another idea. And that's where this naked thing is. With Elizabeth Montgomery doing it in 1975 on the NBC made for or Friday night movie, whatever, which was actually pretty good. Here we go.
Investigators questioned friends and neighbors about the possibility of insanity in Lizzie's family. Fall River was closed-mouthed about the Bordens' private lives.
It wasn't a thing that you taught general conversation among any of my friends I know at that time. I think it's on account of the Borden family. Out of respect for the Borden family, just dropped the whole thing.
It wasn't until a generation later that the question was pondered.
A few days before the trial of Lizzie Borden, an incredible event took place. The impact it had on the jury of Lizzie Borden was unquestionable.
Keep in mind when you hear him speak how immigrants were treated, especially Portuguese immigrants in Fall River, Massachusetts. And remember all of the immigrants that got blamed during the New Orleans axe murders and the axe murders for the man on the train. That was the first people they went after, because there was always been a cultural separation in any city, and everybody had a turn. It was the Italians, it was the Russians, it was the Germans, it was the Swedes, it was this, it was the Portuguese, it was, it was the Indians, it was the, the English, it was whatever. Whoever was new to the town, it had to be them. It's like in San Francisco during, the trains being set up, all the tracks and everything, and all the horrible things they did to the Chinese there. Anything that went on in the town, they blame the Chinese. Is it possible the man he's about to tell you about that they got for the murder of Manchester, is it possible he was set up? We know it's possible that many things go back and forth here, and we've got more evidence for people being coerced into a confession, or innocent people being hung and jailed for things they didn't do. So keep that in mind when you hear that, because I think it's a great possibility, reading all the things that went on in this Manchester crime that happened the day of the choosing of the jury for the Borden trial.
Keep this one fact in mind. In the 275-year history of Fall River, there's been 2 incidents which could be called axe or hatchet murders. The first was the Borden, but the second axe murder took place a couple of days before the jury selection at Lizzie Borden's trial. It sent shockwaves through the city and the county. A local farm girl, one Bertha Manchester, was found hacked to death in her kitchen. Defense attorney Jennings quipped, "Well, are they going to claim that Lizzie Borden did this too?" The quote was printed across the country. Of course, the implication was that the Borden murderer was hacking victims to death while poor Lizzie was rotting in jail. This was the atmosphere in which the Borden jury was selected. The day before the trial, a suspect was arrested, but the news of the arrest was not printed until the following day, and the Borden jury had already been selected and sequestered. In short, they didn't know of the arrest till after they reached their verdict. All they knew was that there was an axe murderer still stalking the streets of Fall River. For what it's worth, the accused was a Portuguese immigrant who had only been in this country for 2 months, making it impossible for him to have killed the Bordens.
Just keep in mind what I said, because we know a lot of innocent people get pushed and liked for a crime. So there you go.
Country lawyer Lizzie Borden will continue.
Yeah, Gene, what time is it in East Africa? Yep, blame the new guy.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All those having anything to do before the honorable justices of the Superior Court, gather round, give your attention, and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
The trial of Lizzie Borden began on June 4th, 1893. A 3-judge panel was appointed to hear the capital case. 30 additional telegraph lines had been temporarily installed to handle the press coverage.
She was particularly careful over her appearance with fancy hats and brooches and things of that nature, where people thought, as a matter of fact, she wore navy blue, where people thought she should have been wearing black. Everyone wanted to see Lizzie Borden. She was held in jail, which was the closest woman facility, and she had to take the train to New Bedford, where the court was held in session, and people would stand by trying to get a glimpse of Lizzie Borden. They wanted to see what she had on that day, if she would look at them, if she would show any emotion, if she would glance, if she would flutter her fan. Every one of her movements were recorded. It was just amazing.
Both sides in this trial were admirably equipped for a battle of the very first class. Knowlton, who prosecuted the case, was a very aggressive, very ambitious, thoroughly prepared and competent, skilled, able prosecutor. He later went on after this case to become the Attorney General of Massachusetts, and he was a master at the technical skills of a good litigating lawyer, a good trial lawyer. But Lizzie had terrific lawyers too. George Dexter Robinson was her principal lawyer, and he had been governor of the Commonwealth. In fact, he had appointed one of the judges, Justin Dewey, who was on the panel of 3 who sat on the trial. And it was Dewey who gave the charge to the jury. The trial really had everything. It was as dramatic as you can get. At one point, when the question arose whether this handleless hatchet might or might not have been the murder weapon, the forensic scientists cleansed the skulls and brought them into the courtroom. Lizzie was unaware that this was going to happen. And she was sitting in the prisoner's dock, and they brought in the skulls of her mother and father in a case and opened them up and put them in evidence and showed or tried to show whether the hatchet did or did not fit. It was actually inconclusive. And she swooned dead away.
The ensuing publicity over the exhibition predictably outraged the Puritan sensibilities of the time.
Dr. Dolan, sir. Looking over the Boston Herald, I saw an article describing your brutal mutilation of the bodies of Mr. and Mrs. Borden. You and General Pillsbury are a disgrace, not only to Massachusetts, but to the whole country. You are not fit to be with decent people. You should be shot like a mad dog. You grave-robbing doctors have dulled the sensibilities of the people by the exhibition of human bodies in court and elsewhere. I presume that if General Pillsbury told you to cut off the heads of the Borden girls, you would do it, you thick-headed idiot. Yours sincerely, John E. Gray.
The prosecution would suffer 2 devastating rulings by the tribunal.
First of all, they kept out the inquest and the inquest testimony. That was the only time Lizzie ever testified, and she contradicted herself quite a bit.
The court excluded that testimony on the ground.
Also true, but keep in mind, she was under a huge dose of morphine when she gave that, and every day they gave her a shot, sometimes twice a day. Now, Lynn, as a nurse for over 30 years, if somebody is given more morphine half an hour after morphine, is that a good time to give a testimony for your life? Just a medical opinion. You would be contradicting what you said. You would be slow to answer. And they put all of this on her and said that that's what made her look guilty. Not fair, which is why it was thrown out of the court. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. I know you're just a little bit behind because Lynn's internet was going in and out, so she's like 10 minutes behind us, so she'll answer a little bit later. But I know the answer. Of course not. That's why it's not allowed to this day. So here we go.
Grounds that since Lizzie didn't have her lawyer with her in the room when that examination was going on before a judge, it wasn't fair. It was kind of a 1892 version of the Miranda rulings, where you have the right to counsel, and if you don't have the counsel when they're asking you the questions, then the questions don't count.
And secondly, they kept the testimony of Eli Bentz out. Eli Bentz was a pharmacist.
We're right there with you,
swore
Gene.
At the inquest that Lizzie Borden had gone into his pharmacy, and his assistant and one of the other customers felt they recognized her also, to purchase prussic acid.
The prosecution offered the testimony to show that she was of a heart depraved and disposed to murder before the day's events of the following day. The defense argued, no, this is too remote in time and a different method altogether, and the judges bought that, and they excluded the testimony.
The prosecution's case hung by a thread on one piece of damning testimony, the dress-burning incident. The defense countered with a most unlikely tiger, and it came in the form of shy, reclusive Emma Borden.
On Saturday, the day of the search, I saw it hanging in the clothes press near the front entry. I went in to hang a dress, and there was no vacant nails, and I noticed this dress of Lizzie's. Later, I said to my sister, "Lizzie, you have not destroyed that old dress yet. Why don't you?" I next saw the Bedford cord dress Sunday morning, August 7th, after breakfast at about 9 o'clock. I was washing dishes, and I heard Lizzie's voice. I turned around and saw she was standing at the kitchen stove. The dress was hanging on her arm, and she said, "I think I shall burn this old dress up." I said to her, "Why don't you? You'd better do it," or something like that. I can't tell the exact words, but it meant do it. And then I turned back to washing dishes and didn't pay any more attention to her at that time.
George Dexter Robinson appointed one of the judges, Justin Dewey, who was on the panel of three who sat on the trial. And it was Dewey who gave the charge to the jury. And a much later justice, Robert Sullivan, who wrote a book about the case, analyzed the charge as a virtual direction to the jury to acquit her.
Catnip for Lynn.
Gentlemen of the jury, have you agreed upon a verdict?
The jury decided Lizzie Borden's fate within 10 minutes after retiring. They stayed another hour out of courtesy. Lizzie Andrew Borden was found not guilty. Lizzie Borden returned to Fall River. If she thought she would be accepted back into the community, she was mistaken.
The courts delivered that verdict, and legally she had been tried, she was acquitted, and she was innocent of the crime. It was left to her contemporaries in Fall River to deliver their own verdict, and they did, and it was a harsh one. And she was ostracized socially for the rest of her life.
When she went back to church, Central Church was her home church. When they went back, she went back after her acquittal, the people that had pews near her moved away.
Miss Russell, Miss Johnstown, and Miss Borden had been the closest friends, where both had proclaimed their belief in her innocence and had been intimate with her. Now they ceased to declare their faith in her and ceased all intercourse with her. This intercourse was never resumed. Neither would talk.
Behave.
It appeared as though, no longer convinced of her innocence, they regarded her as possibly, if not probably, guilty.
C.H. Wells. She returned to the house, got rid of it, bought the big house she wanted up in the Highlands, up on French Street, and got what the neighbors considered to be a bit flamboyant. She had maple crofts carved in the top step. They thought that was very déclassé. And she later referred to herself as Lisbeth of Maplecroft.
And
she had her name legally changed to Lisbeth because nobody believed she had been asked so many times during the trial. Her mother christened her Lizzie, not Elizabeth. And she was always asked, is your name Elizabeth? No, I was christened Lizzie. She never liked it. So she changed it to Lizbeth. And she did have cards made. Lisbeth Andrew Borden. She was named after her dad. And she said, of Maplecroft. Really stuck it to the town. I thought that was kind of cool. Either way, it's chutzpah.
I can remember as a child, people would say, look out the window, Lizzie Borden's going out for a ride. Well, I had no idea who Lizzie Borden was, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. But I'd look out and see a beautiful carriage going by, driven by beautiful horses with a coachman, and thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice? As I remember, it was only looked like an old lady dressed in black going out for a ride. And I'd think, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could have a afternoon's ride Sunday afternoon, looking like that? But we knew we couldn't, so we just turned away.
Lizzie Borden remained in Fall River for the rest of her life, never being accepted, but I guess just too proud and stubborn to leave. 5 years after her trial, a warrant was issued for Lizzie Borden's arrest. She'd shoplifted 2 small paintings at an exclusive jewelry store in Providence. A carving in her mantelpiece at Maplecroft seemed to echo her lonely, melancholy existence. It reads simply, "My ain country." It's part of a Scottish verse that some say in fact is her confession. Listen to the words carefully. The green leaf of loyalty's beginning to fall. The bonny white rose, it is withering in all. And I'll water it with the blood of usurping tyranny. And green will it grow in my ain country. Now, it's not hard to believe that Lizzie felt betrayed and that in her mind, she, the white rose, was withering from her father's miserly conduct and her mother's deceit. And only by taking the blood of these tyrants could she grow and flourish in her own country, i.e. Maplecroft. Could be. Lizzie and Emma lived at Maplecroft until 1905, when Emma abruptly moved out. She moved to another city and took an assumed name. They never spoke to each other again. And Lizzie, well, she died at home in 1927. Her sister Emma died 10 days later. Now, before Lizzie died, the story goes, she was seen talking to a little girl. The mother called the child inside and told her, don't talk to Lizzie. Of course, the little 7-year-old asked why. And the mother replied, because she wasn't very nice to her parents. Till next time, take care.
Well, you heard him talking about the paintings. Again, I don't know. I don't know what the outcome of that trial was. I don't know if somebody accused her, if she really did it, or she took them and thought that he had put it on her charge account. I mean, who knows? But again, we can't bend it to make it fit, right? She did it or she didn't, and I don't know. And I have no evidence one way or the other on that. If somebody else does, please let us know. Now, there are a couple of books. There was a lot of statements in there. I pretty much stopped it through, and I think you guys know enough about it where you could kind of pick out where they were kind of easing it this way or easing it that way, and a couple little things wrong. It was like they had them in a case. They said a case because it sounded more proper. No, they were in a bag, and the bag was knocked over, and that's how everybody in the courtroom saw it before they were ever presented. Then they were presented later in the trial again when, they came up to that part. So these little things here and there, you saw the letter that the young girl wrote about, her doing it in the nude. We talked about, how she could have done it in the gossamer, maybe covered that way. There's also another one where she used the overcoat that was rolled up underneath Andrew Borden's head. that would have been covered in blood. Again, it would have been in her hair and on her face. And quite personally, I don't understand. I mean, you can't do fingerprints, you can't type blood. But if somebody was standing and there was a puddle of blood, would there not be a void where their feet were? Would there not be footprints in the blood below, on the other side of that couch? I mean, his head was just pouring that blood onto the couch. Not a lot soaked into the couch because this couch was one of those horsehair couches, almost exactly like the one that I found it so odd. It was almost exactly like the one that was in Lincoln's parlor in Illinois. We saw the pictures and went through Lincoln's house that he had there. He had that horsehair couch. That's what this was. It was made stiff. It was hard to sit on, but you got a lot of clothes on anyway. It's not like you're sitting there in a pair of shorts. They didn't do that back then. And again, the couch that they have at the bed and breakfast is a replica. It's not the couch. A lot of people say that in their videos too. I'm laying on the couch. No, you're not. You're laying in the house and in the room, but you're not even, on the right wall at this point. So, I'm thinking there had to have been feet void, like if you're looking at blood splatter evidence, you can almost tell, especially these days, it's like, where's the void? Is it a 6-foot man? Because that's the void. The blood splatter stops and hits the person that's doing the crime. And that's what you have behind you. You have a void of no blood splatter, right? You would have that at the feet too. And the fact that they didn't even look, to see if it was, bare feet, a woman's feet, a guy's big boots, we've got nothing. Because they didn't do any, everybody just focused on, here's a woman, we can't search here, we're not going to go in the underwear drawer, we're not going to do, they just didn't do stuff like that back then. But they searched for that murder weapon, top to bottom, all over, right? Somebody even said that somebody wanted to burn the house down and dig down 6 feet to see if anything was the craziest stuff, that was suggested back then. So just crazy. So that's pretty much the layout of how things are. And again, this was done like in the 90s. Again, murder weapon, not even the murder weapon. The evidence. You got 2 bodies. You got a timeline set by witnesses. Now, what gets me is this. Why would investigators, if you want to say that at the time, the police department, everybody doing the best they can. We have the same kind of stuff going on with Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes and, a lot of these crimes that were done back then, the Villisca Axe murder house, and even Bonnie and Clyde in 1934. It's not, it's only about a 40-year difference there. You're not, you don't have the best crime scenes. You had like 2,000 people, as they say, the gathering, after the fact. When Uncle John Morse came back. Now, that's what you have. You got that timeline, and it's again witness statements. There was a church bell at 11, and then you have, Bridget saying that Abby, the stepmother, told her to go outside, even though Bridget was sick. Abby made her go and wash the windows inside and out on a 2-level house, inside and out. These windows, okay? And she was very sick. In fact, she had to throw up a couple of times when she was out there. It was just terrible, right? And she stopped off and talked to the maid next door at the Kellys at that fence. So she was alongside of the fence talking. And Lizzie was in the house. She finished sewing on, some embellishments or something, a lace on a dress. She went down, she ironed some handkerchiefs. She went outside. She didn't eat much for breakfast. She wasn't feeling very good. Everybody is all about this pear tree that's in their yard. You'll hear a lot about people going by and eat pears. John Morse comes back and eats pears. She goes out in the barn and eats a pear. Comes to the kitchen, has another pear. Apparently, they were just eating what was there. It felt, I guess, good to them, not feeling very good, No, she wasn't pregnant. But everybody, no, they were sick because they had swordfish. A lot of people in the town were sick because it had been really hot. There was no refrigeration. People were eating spoiled food that was just kind of little, gone off, and it made them, ill, feel like they had the flu. So the doctors were just inundated with people having it. Everybody in the Borden house was sick. Everybody. They had been talking about, Abby had been going around town thinking that people that were mad at her husband, Andrew, either for the rent, owing him money, him wanting to be paid back. Imagine that. People were mad at him in town. None of the businessmen were mad at him. The only people that he did business with that didn't like him was people under him that he was in their way to move up, just like regular business. We talked about how, if he knew you were doing bad, he'd lower your rent. If you're doing good, he'd raise your rent. Different things like that. How he would go around and collect the rent. In fact, that morning he did it and carried a basket of eggs with him because he was selling eggs as he walked around because he believed in doing more than one thing at once. And this made him a miser, supposedly. Sounded like a businessman that was frugal with money and always trying to make more because he knew, it was never enough, I guess. He's got 3 women he's paying for and God knows what else. So basically, their lives. So you have all that. You got this timeline. Now, the reason I keep bringing up this timeline is because you've got the certain people there in the house. You've got, let me see if I've got one of them. Let me take this down just a second. Let me check this. I think I do. Yeah, I do. Okay. Let's go back just a second. John Morse. I have one of him, but it's coming up. That's the uncle. Now, this is his thing. He got along really good with, he was Andrew's brother-in-law. Okay, he was married to his brother of the first woman he was married to that died when Lizzie was 2, her mother and Emma's mother. They got along really well because he was a businessman making his own way, very much like Andrew. They argued some. They did a lot of business back and forth, like, buying cows, farm things and, equipment and stuff like that. Business things they were involved in together. And he visited often. Sometimes when he stayed there, he would stay in the spare bedroom that was in the attic, which is where Bridget's, can you imagine how hot it was in that attic? Where Bridget stayed. Lovely little room. It's small, but it's very pretty. They have it made up really nice now. But there was a little room there. He usually stayed there. This time he stayed no refrigerator. This time he stayed in the guest room on the 2nd floor where Abby was killed and found her body found dead. Okay. He comes the day before. He visits with Andrew. They eat dinner together, probably that nasty mutton stew or the swordfish or one of the two. They eat and they go back and sit in the parlor and talk business. There was no fighting between them that night. They go to bed. They get up the next morning. He has breakfast with Abby and Andrew. Then they leave the dining area and they go in the sitting room for a little while. And they're all sitting, all 3 of them talking. Meanwhile, Lizzie hasn't come down from her room yet, and Emma's in and out. And of course, Bridget's doing the serving. Okay, so that's who you have in the house: Bridget the maid, Emma, Lizzie, John Morse, Uncle John, and Andrew and Abby. John has breakfast. John, they go in the sitting room. They're sitting there talking. Then Abby gets up and excuses herself, and she starts dusting. She's going through the house, and she's dusting now, and she's going through the bottom and, doing all her stuff. She's big in cleaning. That's what she did. A lot to do in a household back then. And she's looking at everything, and that's when she's getting the idea that she wants Bridget to wash the windows because she's dusting the windowsills and stuff, and she sees the windows are dirty. Okay, a lot of people opening and closing the windows, no air conditioning, no screens, no nothing. It's hot. It's 80 degrees. And it's pretty early. It's about 75 at that point. Okay. And right before, it seems the timeline is somewhere around 8:15, 8:30. That's when John Morse excuses himself. Oh, hi, Peanut. That's when he excuses himself and says he's going to go and visit his niece. Okay. Now, this is also on the mom's side, of their side of the family. And he did this often when he came to town. He would go, I got kittens jumping all over. He'd do this often when he came to town. He'd go and visit his family, and, and they were just outside, not very far, a couple miles away. But he had to take the train, it's more like a trolley car. It's a little car pulled by horses, okay? So he leaves. And he gets on this stage. It's not a stagecoach. It's just kind of one up from that. It's almost like a trolley car, but again, pulled by horses. There's no track. He gets on this transit that they have, and the dude memorizes the badge number of the conductor. How often do you do that when you take the bus, or do they even have badge numbers anymore? I'm not even sure. He memorized the badge number of the conductor, and he knew he was sitting on that, I'm just going to call it a trolley at this point, with 6 priests. Okay? He gets on the trolley, and he supposedly goes to see his niece. His niece backs him up and says, yeah, he was here all afternoon until he left, which is a great statement, by the way. He was here until he left. That's his alibi. But he memorized the damn number. Everything he had. I got here. He's stopping in a town that he was practically grew up in, because he didn't live far away and he was from here, and is asking people for directions. 3 or 4 people testified, or at least went to the police to say, yeah, I saw him. He was here. He asked me for directions. Really? To where? To over here to, the post office, or over here to this little store, or, that street you had to take a left on to go up the. Why would he be asking directions? What does that sound like to you? Memorizing the conductor's badge. You sat there with 6 priests. Talk about your alibis. And his niece said that he was there until he left. What time did he leave? I don't know. Yeah. Okay, Lindsay answer my question. She would be half asleep and not coherent enough to answer questions. Thank you, Lynn. That's pretty much expected that, but I appreciate the medical backup, sweetheart. Thank you. That was in answer to Lizzie being on morphine and doing her inquest. Crazy. So, yeah, he's setting up an alibi. Or he sounds like he might need one. You know what I mean? Doesn't that sound suspicious to you? Like maybe he knows something's going to go down, so he wants to make sure everybody knows where he is. I mean, I'm just guessing, just spitballing here. So when he gets back at the time where a crowd is starting to form in the front yard. Now, that's not the time you heard about in this documentary. That was after the house had been shut down. The bodies are laying in the parlor covered with a sheet, for days. I think it was like 4 days until like the heat started making everything smell. And that's where they decided we're just going to get and bury them. They made them stay in the house. All the family had to stay in the house, and the Russells stayed with them from across the street. Now, this is very odd to me. The biggest odd thing that I can tell you is I do not understand why when Andrew's body was found, everybody didn't go running from that house and refuse to go back in. Not just because of the scene there, but if there's an ex-murderer or whatever murderer that just did this to your dad in the, or the person in this parlor, wouldn't you get the hell out of there till they knew that there wasn't anybody else in the house? Why isn't everybody fleeing this house afraid that there's a murderer on the loose? Unless you knew who it was. Unless it was you or you knew who it was. Again, just a deduction. Do you agree? Something weird's going on there. Because honest to God, Bridget is there. She's out washing windows. She didn't see anything. Abby was the one who sent her out there, not Lizzie. So if Lizzie was going to do it, why didn't Lizzie try to get rid of her? She did tell her about a sale, but I don't think that had anything to do, they got a sale down at, Steinway or whatever. I don't think that's trying to get her out of the house, because the woman's nauseous as all get out, and she was actually, she treated Bridget like a servant. This is their social stature. They didn't even call her Bridget; they called her Maggie. And people are trying to tell you that she had this like one-off affair with her, and they were going to do this murder together and take off. Well, that's not exactly what happened, is it? Don't believe that crap. It's just made up stuff. I mean, so what if they did? But I don't think they did it. With Lizzie's social stature, she wouldn't even think, she couldn't even call her by name. She called her Maggie. And so did Emma, by the way, which was their old maid's name. They just figured they didn't even bother enough to call her by her real name. And she says so in court, Emma does. And Bridget's sitting right there. When asked about that, Bridget's like, well, it made me feel bad, sure, but, I'm the maid. I'm not part of the family. Yeah, but she's going to have an affair with her, you know. And she wasn't, there wasn't no men, there wasn't a zero men interested in her. It was just the ones that weren't in the right social stature. I think she had a beau, and I'm going to tell you about it. I know she had a beau because of all the letters and everything else that, the family doesn't want you to know about. And the people at Fall River Historical Society, a couple of them, I talked to a few of them, and they've seen him with their own eyes. That she had a wonderful romantic relationship with this guy, but they just will not release the name. They're sworn to secrecy. Can't wait till that book comes out. But anyhow, here's John Morse. So John Morse supposedly gets done seeing his niece on this other farm, comes back. Nobody knows how he got back there. He probably took the trolley car again, but for some reason, he doesn't have all the information about that badge number and who he rode with and all that stuff. That's odd, right? In fact, he was liked for this. Now, he also says he came to visit without any luggage whatsoever, right? No luggage, which isn't so odd for the time. I mean, guys would go around and wear the same suit like 3, 4, 5 days at a time. So would the women, depending on their social stature and how many times a day they changed for what event, whatever. But it kind of seems odd to me that he wouldn't have anything with him. No luggage whatsoever. So that's supposed to be said that there's no way he could have done it because he would not have had any clothes to put on. Other people suggest that Lizzie or Emma or whoever, Emma didn't do it. She was gone. She couldn't have done it. She's out. She has the most solid alibi out there. But that somebody loaned him clothes. Or loaned him clothes to do the bloody deed, and then he changed back into his clothes. All of those things are possible. I can't prove one way or the other on that. It's just a theory. But it is odd. He didn't have any suitcase with him. Well, what if he had clothes, but he had them somewhere else? What if they were at his niece's house? Is that possible? Keep in mind, guys, the personal income you did not have to claim. Personal income taxes had not started for several years. So people didn't even care you're passing cash back and forth. What if? What if? So I'm not too sure. Well, you would imagine, Sarah, in our standards, yeah, but gosh only knows. Half of them didn't even wear under stuff underneath. They just walked around in the same old funk for days. It's crazy. But I'm just saying that people will say, well, he didn't even have a suitcase, so he couldn't have changed clothes. There's lots of things he could have done. This is the weird thing that really makes you think about Uncle John. And there's several books that really like Uncle John for this. I don't know that I do, but I think he was involved. I'll tell you why. He came back, again, didn't have all the details of the return as he did as the leaving, which was very suspicious to me. When he came back, there's people gathered around the house. There's police standing in uniform, some not, on the porch, at the doors. Everything's being guarded now, and all the people are milling around the yard, at the fence, and in the front of the house, all around, chitter-chatter talking, right? He walks in, doesn't talk to anybody, as per evidence and what was documented. Supposedly didn't talk to anybody, walks right through the crowd around to the side of the house, in between that side door you saw with the steps up and the screen door, and then the fence that the Kellys were the neighbors of, walks up to the pear tree, pulls off 2 pears, and sits down and starts eating pears. Doesn't ask anybody, what's happened here? Are my nieces okay? Because those are his nieces. Emma and Lizzie. Emma's not back yet. But Lizzie's in there. Is my niece okay? Is my brother-in-law okay? What's going on? Doesn't talk to anybody. Sits there and eats pears. That's weird. That's weird. Now, did he do those things and that was lost to time and not written down? It's just not documented. We don't know that he stopped and asked and then sat down and went, oh, hell, I'm going to eat some pears to find out what's going on here. There you go. Not sure. So, that being said, take it to the next one. I found in several places information that a lot of historians, and I'm going to say this again. I'm not against anybody. You know, if you're going to write a book, you're going to write a book. Most people do it out of the earnest of their heart. They got an idea and they roll with it and they finish the book. I've stated to you before, like talking about the JFK case or any case that many books have been written about. The only time a publisher is going to, unless you're self-publishing, the only publishers are going to take it is if you have new evidence. So you try to switch it around. I got a new idea. The pharmacist did it, you know, and then you write the book and you try to prove your point, you know. Or there's a new one out, just came out, I think a year ago, maybe 2 years, The Trial of Lizzie Borden. Kara, I can't remember her name. I've listened to her interviews. I've read portions of the book. Again, she's not really one way or the other. I think she more sounds like she's leaning like she thinks Lizzie did it. But again, she admits that nobody knows, and, you know, but there's stuff in there that when you go back, it just never happened, you know. And then there's people that try to take Lizzie's side and tell you everything, like all the stuff that's been made up about her cutting the head off of cats and her father killed all her pigeons. Well, he killed pigeons, but he wrung their necks. He wrung their necks. He didn't chop their heads off, you know. But then again, they ate pigeons. You see what I'm saying? Dove, whatever you want to call it. You know, this was a farm. So does that mean that he, you know, again, they made it a big thing like he did it to punish Lizzie. And, you know, I just don't think, you know, you can push and sway that way. You know, we don't know why people did things. We can't get in their mind, you know. It's like, it's funny, like people tell me, why do you go on her show, Steve? She believes this and this. I'll be damned if you tell me what I believe, because my stuff changes every 5 minutes. I'm very, you know what I mean? I tend to believe this, and this, but then it could sway with the more information you get, right? It's funny. You know, sometimes you're not even sure. You think you got it, I got it. Then you get more information. You go, whoa, I got to look at that again. You know, and I think that's the way we should be with this. So Morris goes, he's acting real crazy. You know, that's just odd. Everybody in this whole family is acting odd. I don't understand why the women didn't run and go stay in another house or go to the nearest, you know, whatever their, you know, manly men were back then and like hide behind it, because that's just what they did back then, you know. Oh, clutching pearls. There's a lot of pearl clutching and fan waving going on. I don't get it, right? So that was odd to me. Now, I don't understand how they take in, you know, I'm sure you've got a lot of people. You saw the different people writing letters, and in a lot of these documentaries, they'll read them in dramatic, you know, recordings of this and of the transcripts. All the transcripts are available, multiple different readings on YouTube. You can listen to them. The way they questioned Emma, the way they harped during this inquest with Lizzie, which is documented, was not allowed in court, but you can read how they pushed her and messed with her all kinds of ways. And she's like, I don't know. And they're asking her 15 different ways the same question, and she's just like, and all morphined out. I can't imagine. And just found her father dead, by the way. You'll hear things that Lizzie's guilty, because when Bridget had to unlock the door to let Andrew Borden in, because he kept 4 locks on that front door. He'd been robbed several times. The man used locks, right? So she couldn't, I think the door was probably, something was sticking because it was so hot, maybe swelled. She had a hard time unlocking it. So Bridget, with all her Irish beauty, starts cussing up a storm, you know. And it was just some fine words you didn't normally hear around the house, you know. And Lizzie was coming down the stairs and laughed. And because she laughed, people said that as she walked down the stairs, if she had looked to the side and bent down a little and looked under the bed, she could have seen Abby there, and that she was standing there laughing on the stairs at Abby being dead. Okay. There's high possibility that she came down those stairs and never looked in that room. There's high possibility, you hear a lot about the door being shut to Abby's room and then left open, that nobody could figure that out. What if the killer was hiding in there and he left the door open? Or she? all these things are just so easily explained away, but no, not one thing proves anybody's guilt yet. Am I right? Not hands down. Never found the murder weapon. Never found any blood on Lizzie. She was well looked over with her doctor standing there. Okay? We talked about the spot of blood found on the inside of her dress. She was menstruating at the time, and her doctor affirmed so. And it was menstrual blood. It was tested. So don't let anybody tell you that. Okay? I don't think she did it naked. I don't know. But because they didn't run out of the house, because you got to think about, I'm a human being and I don't know who just bludgeoned half my family and I don't know where the murderer is, I'm out of this house till I know it's safe. That's got me questioning. Has me questioning, but it would be answered if you were the murderer and you knew who did it, so you had nothing to fear, or you knew who did it and you knew they left. That's possible. That's real possible. It's possible with the timing. I don't think she had the time to change between the time Abby, if the timeline is correct at the 9 o'clock time, I don't think she had the time to change before Bridget came through. I don't care about this letter that Abby was supposed to go visit somebody. Abby could have told her that. Anything could have been going on there. Hard evidence, I don't think she had the time. She did not change her dress. That was stated by several people. You'll hear that in books too, that she was seen in multiple dresses. No, it's not true. It's made up stuff. Okay? So, here's a little something you might not know. And if you know something about this, please give the information. This came out in 97. A man named Peterson really started digging. Why? Because he had a trunk that was passed down to him that was given to his grandparents by Lizzie Borden. He knew a lot about Lizzie Borden's later life, that she was very involved in charities, especially anything to do with children, the poor, animals. She was a huge animal activist, which again explains, she didn't go around cutting heads off of nothing. She didn't even like killing stuff. She didn't do any, the girls did none of that. That was all the maid, the father. And they didn't pluck any chickens. Let's just put it that way. It's not their social stature. However, as I said, there was about 200 Borden families in Fall River, not just in Massachusetts, in Fall River. And a distant cousin of Andrew's, and this is Andrew here, and this is William Borden. Okay? Now, there had been a fight going on amongst the Bordens, multiple level fights, money issue, all kind of stuff. However, there was a time when Andrew was, his wife had died, and I guess he was out and about, and there was some kind of an issue here with a distant cousin, an adult, okay? And this is William Borden, supposedly the illegitimate son of Andrew Borden. At least he thought he was. Now, I can't tell you all the details behind the fact of where they came up with it, but it was an ongoing thing. He'd come to visit often. There was often a fight. He wanted to be treated as a son. He wanted to be accepted into the family. He wasn't poor. He was a self-made guy himself. He was something called a horse renderer. And if you know what that is, in those times, a horse renderer would come if you had sick cattle, a sick goat, a sick horse, and it was incurable. He would take the horse or the livestock out. He would do it by hitting him in the head with an axe. He carried a good size axe. He kept it in a burlap sack, and he kept it in a cart. Oh, one second, one more, I think. There it is. There's a picture of the cart. Well, not the cart, but similar. Kept it in a cart, and this is what the hatchet looked like that he carried. He would usually bop him over the head with the the flat end of the axe, and if he had to cut something off, he'd use the hatchet. He would ride up on top, and there's a little tuck space underneath the seat, and that's where he would keep his hatchet. Now again, he would often come to visit the Bordens. There would always be a fight, especially when that house was bought for for Abby's sister, and the house bought for the girls, which they turned down and Andrew bought back. Are you with me so far? William Borden, anytime he went to the house or went to the bank to visit, he was hanging out at the new building. That was the Borden building that was almost completed. In fact, Andrew Borden had gone there that morning. Now, it was a big place, kind of like H.H. Holmes' house had, but it wasn't a murder castle. It was businesses above, like offices, like a new idea. And then there were the stores below. And they were just putting the finishing touches on it. Some of the stores were getting rented below, and all this belonged to Andrew Borden. And he went down to check it out. William Borden often met him there. And, would talk to him again. It's like, please, understand, accept me, and they would go through their all over private conversations. It would almost always come out to, a verbal battle between them. He just did not want to accept him, because to accept him, he would have to admit that he had sex outside of marriage, and that was just something you did not do in that social movement. It was much better to just keep shunning this guy. He helped them out here and there, but most of the time this guy was pretty busy with his own business. Now, earlier I kept saying, why do they take some witness statements and choose to listen, but not others? Why are some thrown out? I'd like to introduce you to Miss Ellen Egan. Now, this is the way she spelled it, Ellan, Egan. And herself and her descendants have stuck with this story since. Mr. Peterson, he dug into it because he had, like I said, this connection through his family. He had this big old trunk that Lizzie had given his grandparents or somebody. And there was nothing in the trunk that broke this, but he started digging. He goes, I want to know what happened here, very much like we have the past couple episodes, right? So he's digging around, and he finds the testimony that Ellen Egan gave the police, all written out. He found out she didn't go once. She went five times. 5 times. And there's also letters with her family that she's writing back and forth, telling people, I've gone to my husband, and I've explained this again. You didn't go down to the police station and start giving a witness statement. If you don't go to your husband first, tell him this is what you're going to do. Husband said they're never going to listen to you. She said, I can't sleep knowing this information. This was the information she gave. At exactly 11 o'clock, she's walking down the street. I forget where she was going. She hears the church bell. That's how she knew it was 11 o'clock. She's approaching the Borden house that you see here in the middle. She's coming up the street. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she's startled because she sees a man run out the front door with a burlap bag in one hand, obviously with something in it. Throw the burlap bag under a seat, jump in a small cart, and leave. And she said, on my honor, it was William Borden. He almost ran into me. I've seen him here many times before. They threw out her testimony and her witness statement, and she went back 5 times and gave the same story over and over again. Something to think about. William Borden. Now, if it's possible, we don't know what went on there. We don't know who knew who and who talked to who and what. We can't say that. It would be all made up out of whole cloth. I can't tell you that. But could it be that somehow William Borden came in and did it? Maybe Lizzie saw him come out. He went down, killed the dad. Maybe that's who he was waiting for and just took out Abby because he got scared. Who knows what happened in there? Doors opening and closing, and we heard this and we didn't hear that. I don't know. I'd need a little something more to land on that. But Ellen Egan never changed her story. She went to her deathbed saying this happened. Do we have anything else to back that up? Any other suspicious behavior? Did anybody show up with a lot of money afterwards? Did Bridget show up with a lot of money? No, she did not. She went to Montana. I don't know where she got the money to go to Montana. I can't tell you that. But she never spoke about this trial again. And she didn't show up with any money. She went out there to family. And she lived a very, middle of the road life. Okay? I told you she died blind and senile. She never spoke about the trial. So when people tell you she had a deathbed confession, BS. Never happened. Okay? William Borden stayed pretty, as he normally did. He was a horse renderer. He kept his business. He kept doing his thing. Okay? And there's another picture of that with him. And you'll hear historians tell you that this is complete garbage. Why are they throwing it out? Why are they not considering it? There's people at the Historical Society talk about it. There's, books written that has this in it. People seem to throw this out. Why? I think, and I'm saying I think, this is my opinion. I think they're throwing it out because it doesn't fit the narrative. It muddies the waters here. But, facts are funny things, as John Adams said. They keep coming back. I think this one holds water a little bit. Okay? Here's the next thing. This is John Morse and William Borden. Little something happened 9 years after the Lizzie Borden trial. Okay. Now, I found some great people, and I'm going to tell you that, and then we're going to be done. Because I think I've dug into this as much as I can. I can't put myself there. I can't tell you how all this went down. But there's some really strange behavior, even for people in 1890, in the social class that they were in, trying to understand how people, just things that people did not do back then, or women didn't do, or even think about doing. But I don't think human reaction has changed that much. I think Lizzie was stunned. I think she was acting stunned, possibly in shock. If she did it, of course she'd be in shock. Because if you're hitting somebody again, 1, 2, 3, just straddling somebody and hitting them over the blood going everywhere, hair pieces coming off, all kind of horrible stuff. This is somebody you knew for 30 years. Maybe you didn't like them. That's a lot of rage. We know the axe man on the train did it. The Villisca axe murder guy did it. Same amount of blows, just use the other side of the hatchet, killed children and all kinds of stuff. Hung out there for long periods of time. I'm not saying a serial killer did it. I'm saying it's possible. It's possible. But I think if it was a serial killer and somebody saw them and didn't know who it was, I think the women there would have been scared. I don't think Bridget knew shit what was going on. I think she was sick. She was vomiting outside. She was cleaning windows. It's 80 degrees. She's on a ladder. I think she was just stunned. She's running around doing everything everybody told her to do, as she would as the maid. She's just caught up. Okay. Lizzie, I think, was stunned and in shock, one way or the other. Maybe she did it, and that's what caused her the shock and the stoic. But she wouldn't be scared to be in the house if she saw who did it, if she did it, or if she knew who did it, and it was over, and she had nothing to fear. That makes sense? Possible. Now, I found another wonderful guy. His name is William Masterson. He wrote a book called Lizzie Didn't Do It. Very compelling. There's great interview on YouTube where he's given a lecture at a library. I read a little bit of his book and looked into a couple other interviews and him talking on it. He's got some great theories. I don't know that he agrees with this one, but he also said the same things I was saying. However, how a person reacts to a tragedy it really shouldn't be the only thing that convicts or otherwise, because people act different in different things. You can't ever say the way you're going to react, but it is odd that they weren't scared that they were going to be hacked to death too. That bothers me. But this would answer that. Now, another fantastic guy. I absolutely love this man. He has done a wonderful job over on his channel. His name, and I spelled it wrong in the video. I apologize. I was trying to give him give him credit here, but I said Nolan, and it's not Nolan. It's Mr. Dave Norton, and he is over there on. I think I got it written. Oh, here it is. He is over there on a YouTube channel called Dave Norton, but he runs like a little history montage that he does there. Fantastic little channel. It's called Discovering New England History. Okay. He's got some in there like on the Alamo. I don't know how that connects to New England, but go for it. Like 4 different episodes. He's got a couple other episodes on another thing. It's very interesting, but I love the way he went about this, and I highly recommend, if you're interested in this case, you go back and watch that, because that would be the definitive beginning to end. You're going to get all the information that happened here. Plus, he actually lives there, so he goes around and he takes pictures, and he does something I think is really cool. He does like the before and after. So if you found what the building looked like in 1890, and then side-by-side comparison if the building's still there. And it's really neat to see how everything changed. He takes you to the graveyard. He shows you the grave sites where Lizzie's buried right there with Abby and Andrew. People go all the time. He shows you Maplecroft, and he shows you all the different things, but he takes you through a little bit of the town, a little bit of the history of the town. It's very well done 4-part series, and I'd like to give him credit on this. I've got a couple of minutes of that, and I want to send you over to his channel. Like I said, Dave Norton, Discovering New England History, and I'd like him to be the one to tell you this next part, because I thought it was lovely the way he did it. It's just 4 minutes of this man's fourth part of his series, but I love the way he put it and the way he worded everything, and I think you're gonna get a little zing out of it. Okay, so here we go, Mr. Dave Norton. Dave, yeah, Hot Mess Express. Dave Norton, not Dave Nolan, as I have here in this video. Here we go.
Came out in 1997. So we'll go to the next slide.
It's Pete Peterson. That's the guy who got the trouble.
This is one of the, actually 3-part story. And this was the final part here is a picture of William Borden and a picture of Andrew Borden. And it's called the William Borden story. It was in the Spectator, February 5th, 1997. Very, very compelling story. We'll go to the next slide. Now, William Borden, of course, he was the one that was spotted coming out of the Borden house, and he always carried an axe underneath his wagon, and he was a horse renderer, which meant anytime the city of Fall River had diseased cattle or horses that they had to put down, they would call him, and he would take care of them with his axe and dispose of the carcass, and that's what he did. Now, in the night of when he was hung from the tree, it's really kind of interesting because first of all, the police didn't know who he was, and they said, "Oh my gosh, it looked like he was murdered from the tree." And then someone identified him, and once they found out he was William Borden, it was one of the interesting things. The police changed it from murder to suicide. Some people speculate when you change it to suicide, the criminal case is over. You don't have to find the murderer.
Just to reiterate, William Borden was found in Fall River. Okay, this is just one of the towns he covered with his horse rendering. 9 years after the murders, hanging by the neck from a tree. And first he was drugged and then hung. Okay? And there's a little more to it. Like he said, they changed it. You see? For the courts. Why? Maybe they didn't want to dig in it. Maybe they wanted to squash it. I don't know. But that's a little suspicious to me.
And that's what was done. They called it a suicide. And that certainly is really interesting. And that same day, John Morse was viewed in the vicinity the night before. John Morse completely disappeared from Fall River, and no one ever knows where he went. So we'll go to the next slide. And here's some of the...
How about that? John Morse was seen in that exact spot, hanging around where that tree is. I don't know whether it was a park. I've been trying to dig, but I can't get a focus on it. They didn't have Google Earth back then. But from what I can dig out of all the books and the research, this guy was hanging around. John Morse, the uncle, who memorized the badge number, who knew every minute, who stopped and asked people in a town he grew up in directions. That seems suspicious to me. Lizzie knew them both. Could it be? Could it be somehow they were all in this together? Maybe it was planned. Maybe it was not planned. Maybe she just walked in on them and shut her mouth because she knew that they were fixing whatever. I don't know. Again, that's all guessing, But this looks suspicious to me. And then John Morse left the town he grew up in that he hung in, quite often. Of course, after Andrew died, he wasn't there much. This is 9 years after. He stopped coming around because he didn't know that many people. He might go and see his niece or whatever, who left as well. Okay. A little weird. All right. Now, here's some good questions. I like Dave's questions here, and I thought it'd be interesting to go over them with you. Here we go.
Questions they had, very compelling that he found out. Question 1, where are the reports of Ellen Egan's questioning by police? All those records were destroyed. And of course, he was never called to testify. They wanted the case squared away. They knew, basically, they felt that Lizzie's the one that did it. We don't want to keep this case open. We want to close the case. And she was never called to testify. And then question 3 there, what was John Morse doing the night before Meridian Street where William Borden was hung? Nobody knows that either. But he was spotted by several people there and identified. And question 4, they want to know why did they rule out William's death as originally charged, thought it was a murder, then change it to suicide after they found out who he was? Question 5, where are the files on the burial of William Borden? And that was an interesting story too, because they said that, quite a few years later, the neighbor, which was Pete Peterson, his mother lived in Fall River and of course knew Lizzie, and they wanted to find out some more, so they had Pete, I guess, do some investigating. And first they went to the Oak Grove Cemetery, and they said, we'd like to see the files on the burial of William Borden. And they said, well, you have to get a court order. And I said, okay, that sounds interesting. So they went back maybe a week later with a court order, and they asked them for the burial files of William Borden. They wanted to see what was actually put down as the cause of death, actually who was his father. They wanted to see all those records. And they said, well, no, a couple of weeks ago, we had a fire in the office and the records were burned. That's kind of interesting. And of course, number 6 was quite interesting. What happened to William Borden's axe and wagon? Never found. Here he was, hung from a tree. No one ever found the wagon. Never ever found the axe, which could have been possibly the murder weapon. Never found it all. Of course, 7, why did John Morse leave Fall River the day after William's death? Was never heard from again. And part of that was when Pete did some research on that, some digging on that, William Borden was actually, that day before he was hung, he was actually supposed to go to the Fall River Police, but it was on a different matter. It had nothing to do with Lizzie Borden. It was a different matter, probably something to do with whatever he did with the disposing of the horses and the cattle or some other issue. It had nothing to do with Lizzie Borden. And there's always speculation that John Morse found out about that and maybe William Borden, they found out some information about him, and perhaps he was going to, after 9 years, say something he shouldn't say. We don't know. It's all, it's quite compelling story here. And of course, why did Ellen Egan's close friend, she was a close friend of Bridget Sullivan, the maid, why did she relocate to Montana? And Pete always felt that, at least in the article, that maybe she was afraid of her life at that point. We don't know. It's just kind of an interesting twist. So you really never know on some of these famous murders and whatever. Maybe many years afterwards, somebody's going to dig up some information or something, present a compelling story, and maybe they'll come up with something, another theory. So we'll go to the next slide. And of course, Pete Peterson thought his theory was there a conspiracy to commit murder? In other words, was Bridget involved, because she never said anything about the murders, with Lizzie? Was William Borden involved, and was John Morse involved? Was there a conspiracy? And some think that Lizzie Borden, because she hated her stepmother so much, actually killed her stepmother. And some people believe that William Borden, she had him come by about an hour and a half later, and he killed Lizzie's father.
I don't believe that one. Well, there you go. I'm sorry, you could hear the purring baby. Could you hear the purring baby? He's all pixelated. Stick your little. He's so asleep. Oh, you're all pixelated. There you go. There he is, Mr. Spirit. This season he's Christmas Spirit. He's Halloween Spirit. He's just got spirit. And I'm sure you can hear me kissing his little face. So what do you think? Isn't that a zinger? Here you got William Borden, who visited often, trying to get his rightful place as Andrew's son. I don't have DNA on that. I don't have any, Ancestry.com, leaves falling off the tree kind of thing. I don't have it. But that looks suspicious to me. Reasonable deduction. Reasonable. Common sense. It would explain a little bit of how she said things. Come in. Someone is hurt. Come in and hurt father. The way she was talking, again, you can't really say way somebody should act or not act, especially in shock. Lincoln backed me on that. It's just people are going to react the way they're going to react. I've seen people on fire, they don't even realize it. They're just, Steve's told that story, so many different things. So, but it would explain the fact that they didn't run from the house. I think if there was 2 murders in the house, I would say, you're not going to make me stay in that house. I don't care who you are. The murder could be, out. They had cops surrounding the house. They told you that. That's true. They weren't completely alone. That's why they knew that people came down the stairs with a lantern and stayed in the parlor for a little bit. Well, maybe there were sisters just saying goodbye to their, because by then Emma's there, saying goodbye to their parents. That doesn't mean she's guilty. You've got movies where she's coming down there with Emma and they're standing over there laughing, over the bodies. They don't have anything on that. That's made up stuff. So now maybe when you see Lizzie, with a hatchet and she pops out at Disney, Universal Studios as a, Halloween character, going to chop you with an axe or, something else, or on The Simpsons, she's become a character, a scary character, something to scare you. We got a mini series that she was a serial killer. We've got books that she was a detective, a girl detective. This baby's just out. He's just out. And they're doing great, by the way. They're doing great. They did great at the vet. The vet said they were perfect. I have a vet that actually said that my kittens have perfect beans. I'm keeping this vet. Absolutely. And they're getting their adult teeth. This one here's got the biggest adult teeth. And I said, yeah, that's from chewing on his brother. He's got the sharpest teeth chewing on his brother. But they're doing great. They're like little velociraptors. They hunt together. And Boo got his first mouse that tried to get in the back door, broke into the wrong place. But they're doing great. But I think Lizzie's really gotten a crappy, 130 years. If she did do it, if she had anything to do with it, if she, knew who did it and held her silence, thinking that there was no way they would ever accuse a woman, and kept her silence, to the end, and then thought, okay, well, if she's going to be acquitted, excuse me, if she's going to be found guilty, she could have said, okay, I have new evidence. I'm going to spill the beans. And she would have gotten, another trial. She would have gotten, an appeal. And that's the way that would have done, because you can't tell me that a woman wouldn't do that trying to protect somebody, right? Because look at the conspirators. Look at Mary Surratt, right? She kept her mouth shut and wouldn't tell where her son was, and he was the only one that didn't get hung. Remember that? Right to the bitter end. Upside down kittens. Yeah, he's flopping over now. This one sleeps broken, like his legs will go this way, this will go that way, his head somewhere else. He's the most chill cat. He really is. Boo's a little bit more hyper, but he's cool. They're both very cool, loving babies. But that one really got me thinking, and this makes sense to me. Oh, Ted, for having an upside down kitten. Do you see what you just got? They just gave you all the way from, so far away in the world. You got love. Look at this. Thank you, darling, so much. You're very sweet to this show, and I just love you. Thank you, darling. And love to your fur babies as well. Look at that beautiful baby face. Look at that. Thank you, darling. Thank you for being such a great friend of this show. And thank you, everybody that are here, that stay here and, put up with my mistakes and everything else. We're just honest here, And, oh, Jean, thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Good night, Jean. And I hope you weather the storm well, darling. You're not alone. You come in here and you've always got friends around you. We can't keep the rain and the lightning off you, but we can surround you with light and love as much as we can. Okay? You got a home here. You come back anytime. Thank you for coming in. I don't know who Lizzie's secret lover. Okay. I have a theory, and it's just a theory. I think she was extremely close to Dr. Borden. Now, he lived across the street. I don't know his whole status and everything else, but it has been said, and there were several reports by the police that were in the room, that they saw Dr. Borden in there talking to Lizzie, and he was burning papers. They were close enough to see one of the papers had Emma written on it, so being that close, you could see her sister's name written on there like it was a note to her. I have no clue about that. But they seem to have a very close relationship. He seemed to be very protective of her. He would have had that stature, but I believe he was married. So there you go. There's been a big quiet thing. Not a lot of people got divorced back then, I'm telling you. It just didn't happen. I think it's possible. He stayed very close with her. He was very protective of her, but that, of course, that could have been that he was her doctor all her life. A lot of people lean that way and say, oh, it was because she was abused and he knew about it, so he's extra protective of her. Again, it's possible. I see no evidence for that. Not hard evidence anyway. Just people thinking, like I'm doing tonight. We're just thinking and we're just talking. I have no evidence on that. It's just a theory. But I don't understand how police are in the room and watching somebody burn stuff in a house where there's been a murder. So again, that gives you another idea of how sloppy the crime scene was treated, and evidence. And it's no doubt that they had no evidence for this trial. I don't believe it ever should have gone to trial, but it just seems to me that anything that had anything to do with somebody else doing this other than Lizzie got thrown out. And what they had after the fact It's nothing. You have 2 dead bodies. You have a timeline by a few witnesses. Love you so much. You know, and you got a very suspicious acting crowd here. You know, like I said, you know, 2 people just got murdered in the house. I would just, you know, pull over and make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and watch, you know, listen to a radio show or something. I'd get the hell out of that house until you found the murderer. But it makes sense. You know, she could have walked in on it. She could have saw it happening. She could have walk by with the axe and just like, you shut up or I'll get you too. Could have been. You know, she feared for her life, but knew as long as she kept her mouth shut. Mwah, go be with your brother. There you go. They're getting too big for the basket. I got to get a bigger basket. So, does that make sense to you guys? So here we are. Take all of that into consideration, okay? The Portuguese immigrant that might have gotten, you know, coerced into a, you know, because it was definitely known back then, people were coerced into it, you know, a confession or you did this and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they're scared and half of them don't even speak the language and it's just, everything's lost in translation. I can't imagine. But just because there was a suspect for the Manchester doesn't mean that it couldn't have been some serial killer that came in and slipped back out again. Don't listen to people that'll tell you that there's no way that somebody killed somebody at 9 o'clock. Again, that timeline is a little off, and then waited around and did it again, and killed somebody else, because it happened right down the street to Manchester. Same daggum thing. And that killer hung around for 3 hours till everybody got out of there. She wasn't leaving. I think he killed her. You know, who knows? And then he hung around for a while more. A lot of these serial killers with the axe people that I've studied, you know, with Steve and both with Donnie and, you know, talking about it, you know, all of them did this. So don't listen to experts and historians and scholars that tell you that this stuff doesn't happen, because it happened a lot. And it happened a lot more than we have documentation for, because a lot of things slip through the cracks. Am I right? Okay. So again, remember Miss Manchester getting killed right there in Fall River. Remember the New Orleans axe man and the things that he used to do. The man from the train is the scariest one, because he seemed the most deliberate, that he would hang around after the murders for long periods of time. Just a lot of weird stuff. And when I get to Villisca Axe Murder House, that one's a real doozy. You're going to hear even more of some of the stuff that these people did. And people telling you that this can't happen are just plain talking, because you can't put all that in a definitive box and put a lid on it and go, fact. You can't veer from this, because they all veer from it. And you can't tell me that it's a rare thing and it never happens, when it happened just days into Lizzie Borden's trial in the same town. So it's not exactly rare. Okay. So there you go. I think we have a good amount of knowledge here that tells you that something was screwed up in this, that they were definitely focused on Lizzie and nobody but Lizzie. Tried to give her the evidence at the end of the thing. We showed them they were done. They were done looking. I believe that this William Borden was there. She wasn't the only one who saw him. But I didn't want to bring too much of that up, because I don't have all the names and pictures and stuff like that. But she wasn't the only one. It was people that spoke of it, but wouldn't speak of it anymore. You know, because they were scared. They were scared they were going to get axe murdered. You know, think about it. You know, I mean, what's the protection? You know what? You know what I mean? It's just weird. It's just a different time. The whole thing with William Borden being drugged, I never could find the name of the drug. I was looking and I couldn't find it, but it knocked him out apparently, and then he was hung. They changed it, got rid of the axe and the carriage. Somebody did, and then gone. John Morris is gone, never to return back to Fall River ever. Nobody has a clue where he went. And keep in mind, there could have been a lot of cash involved here, because at the time of her death, Lizzie was worth over $250,000 that time. Now, that's almost what, $8-9 million? It's a lot of money. She left it all to charity, every bit of it. She died 1927, I believe. But this is what people forget. She was acquitted. If you had a trial today with the evidence that was given during this trial, no matter how hot a day it was, no matter how many times people tell you she wasn't going fishing, that trip was planned 3 months before time. Everybody knew she was going. Talked about it all the time. That she tried to buy poison, that she tried to do this, that she went around and told people that something is going to happen to father. There's been constant fights, people mad at him. You got William Borden showing up and probably threatening him. I don't know what he said, but there was agitation and violent speak is some of the words that were used when he came around, because they fought. You got people in town saying that somebody did a good job when they killed Andrew Borden because they owed him money, or he made them pay the rent, or you got slighted in business or something else. And Abby was running around days before telling him people that she thought that they were going to be poisoned or something was going to happen to them. So something was going on in that house, in that town, that made people worried about, because Andrew was the person he was in business or whatever, that tensions were high. It's hot, and these people are wearing a lot of freaking clothes from their neck to the floor. I would be agitated too. You see? Something went on. The way John Morris acted when he returned back, the fact that he learned the badge number. Who does that? For no reason, unless you know something's going to happen. Why do you need an alibi? Why are you asking people directions in a town you grew up in? You know damn well where everything is. All right. So I can't tell you who was involved here and who wasn't, but I think William being hung and everything being brushed under the rug by the police there. They didn't want it brought up again. They didn't want anybody looking that they might have tried an innocent woman, or at least not got to the bottom of what actually was going on. That makes sense, So, that on top of everything else. So Lizzie did pass, and in 1927 in her home in Maplecroft. But and she never spoke to her sister again. Again, you're going to hear things about her having an affair with an actress again. The whole troop was there. The whole, you've got these little troops traveling around, little theater troops, and they're putting on shows, and they're trying to get money from rich people. She was a rich people, and she liked going to the theater. She liked this actress. She liked the troupe. She invited everybody back to her house. She threw parties. She didn't drink. She didn't do drugs, but she threw parties. And I believe that when Emma, she had enough of that. She was more strict than anybody tells you that Lizzie was. And she was basically Lizzie's mother. She said that in the trial, that she raised her since her mother died as her mother. She was about 12 when... was 9 when about 12 when her mother died, and Lizzie was 2.5. So that makes sense, right? And she didn't like Lizzie having these big parties and hanging around with these people. She never lived with that woman. She never had that kind of relationship like you're going to hear. That's not true. The facts are she did buy a house for this woman and her friends. And then eventually, very quickly, they all split up and parted ways. I think Lizzie probably got the gist that she was just after her money. And, she went on to another troupe and went and saw other, plays in New York and things like that, met other people. And she lived her life inside that house. And she did travel and she did some things like that. But, we talked about her acts, her actions. Why did she stay in that town? I can't tell you that. I think that's anybody's guess. Why does she have that poem on her, that my ain country on her, maybe she liked the poem. I think I might be reading a little bit too much. I used to have things written on, my walls and, like certain sayings for certain reasons too. You'd be hard pressed to see why I like that. That's just assuming things, Was she the white rose that she was going to water with blood from the tyrants? I don't know what that meant to her. I can't say. That's an assumption, and I think that's really stretching it a little bit too far. That's trying to fill in everything and make your narrative work and give it a little bit of color. Nobody can guess any more than you can say what I'm thinking right now, because I don't even know what I'm thinking right now or what I believe, because I believe certain things, but like I said, they could change. So to stem everything off of that, I think is unfair to Lizzie. Again, because of her actions in that house, because of John Morris's actions when he showed up, there's something going on there. Something's not right. Something's not right. So, yeah, it's just another mystery, Davy. And that's the way it is. But anybody else tells you that they know or they can prove this or whatever, I gotta say, they're selling books, they're trying to get out there, and poor Lizzie. I know mediums that have gone into that house and said that they're picking up, child abuse and things like that. But again, if you continue to go in a dwelling and repeat things over and over again, and there's that kind of hostility and that kind of murder and people going in and dredging this up constantly, day after day after day. It's the same thing you get when you're on the battlefield in Gettysburg or anywhere else, day after day after day, all these ghost tours going through and people bothering the spirits there. Eventually you can create what it's like an energy entity. You can do this through PK and your abilities, and like say you have abilities and you don't use them and you don't do anything to control that or expel that energy, it will expel itself and create another thing, especially out of anger or angst or suffering. And I believe from the few mediums that I've talked to, and some of them you would absolutely know their name, they feel that that house has an entity in it that has been created over time that's never been human. And that's like one of the scariest things to come out of here is what human beings have done after the fact. To have a home like that, I understand historical, but to go in there continuously and dredging this up and, people talking about it and recreating scenes and eating the mutton stew, which is gross, laying in the beds, taking pictures, asking Lizzie, did you do it? Did you do it? You're never going to get a definitive answer. I don't care if somebody comes across with, this is Elizabeth Andrew Borden, and I did it, and I did this. Well, how do you know? It's not going to be definitive evidence. So my thing is, if we could just let these people be in peace, because, to me, I think I showed, over these past 2 episodes, what we had is facts. We had very little facts and evidence. We had a whole lot of conjecture and theory and opinion and made up stories. But when you're boiled down to the facts, 2 people lost their lives in a horrible way. And other people affected by that got their lives changed. In some cases for the better. Maybe Bridget had a better life in Montana. We don't know where some of the other people went. A lot of the people that were involved in this just disappeared. Like John Morse and the niece. Did they get paid off? Did they get money to stay quiet? We don't know. We don't know if they had their own. We don't know. But I think, if nothing else, I proved reasonable doubt exists in the Lizzie Borden case. And I think enough reasonable doubt that we can please look back on a woman that went through a horrible tragedy. Her family had a horrible tragedy. If she did it, then she did it, and she's dealing with what she did on the other side. You know what I mean? If she was involved in it, then only she really knows, and the person who did it. Everything else is just theory and conjecture. But William Borden being hung on that tree, and John Morse disappearing after the fact, and being in that town that night before and that day, and hanging around that area, around the tree area, I don't know if it's a park or what. It's very suspicious to me. And at the very least, says that we don't have the whole story. And if we don't have the whole story, we probably need to stop making it up and pretending that we do. Because the only people that know what happened in that house were in that house. And I think Lizzie got a bad shake. She had enough nerve to stay in that town, live her life out in Maplecroft, and maybe she won. But I want you to remember that while she was in that house and trying to entertain guests and trying to be peaceful and adopted as many animals as she could and took very good care of them. And I've shown you pictures of her with her boxers and everything else, and leaving all her money to animals and charity. She had a constant background of taunting with the townspeople and the children singing the Lizzie Borden doggerel of Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. And as I said in the first 5 minutes of these 2 episodes, there's not one word of that song that's true. And that's just a damn shame. Reasonable doubt. There you go. Now, what do you think? Do you think Lizzie did it by herself? Or do you think there's reasonable doubt to say that something else went on in that house? Guilty or not guilty? What do y'all think? There's going to be a little delay. But again, I can't believe that she had to listen to that all through her, the rest of her life. And again, or not. There you go, Davy. There you go. Not guilty. Dixon Bell. Ted Branson, poor Lizzie. Not guilty, Aunt Edna. Reasonable doubt, Sarah. Good for you. Reasonable doubt. That's all you need in a murder case. That's why she walked free. It was reasonable doubt. And again, she didn't get off because she was a woman. Not guilty, Aunt Edna. In the papers, if you read them at that time, there was nothing in it about her being a woman that got her off. You know, there was in the closing statements by the the defense. You know, do you think a woman like this could do that? Again, I don't know. She wasn't into hard labor. These girls weren't out there cutting heads off of chickens and plucking them. They didn't do that. The help did that. You know, they were above that. They didn't have that kind of muscle. That takes an awful lot. Yeah, your adrenaline can really propel you forward. And I know I can do some damage with an axe. But, you know, I've swung an axe. I've chopped wood. I've done things like that. You know, I've done concrete. I've shoveled gravel. I've done, you know. But I'll tell you what, 19, think about that. Just count to 19. Takes a lot. These other axe murderers running around had no problem doing that kind of thing. But even Steve told you that sometimes they got the axe stuck and you could see a boot print on there trying to get the axe back out. I don't think she had it in her. As much hate as people say she had for her mother-in-law and all this other stuff. Yeah. Just a lady that fitted the easy facts. Good way to put that, Ted. I like that. It's very good. You know, and it's obvious that the powers that be wanted it to be that way. It seemed like they poo-pooed any, you know, and dismissed any evidence that didn't fit it. And, you know, if they were doing that 130 years ago and they did it to Bonnie and they did it to so many others that we've talked about here on this show, we didn't even know what was going on with, family secrets are involved. I'm sure. You know, you got an illegitimate son. You know, you got people trying to demonize the victims and tell them that this and this, and that yet you go back and you read letters that from the townspeople and the stuff that, you know, they were talking about. I'm sure people were a little mad, you know, that he raised their rent or, you know, whatever, businessman, you know, stuff or outbid somebody on something. You got some hurt feelings there, you know. Not one person said that they ever saw in town, like that lady said, that sweet lady in that documentary said, nobody had anything bad to say about the Bordens. It was the Bordens. They were treated different because you were the Bordens. But not one person ever said that they saw him acting inappropriate with Lizzie or anything like that. Now, this is a very tight little town here. Can you imagine if Dr. Borden from across the street knew that he was diddling his kids, that he wouldn't have said something? A businessman like that all these people could have pulled him out of all the stature that he was in. The whole reason he denied William was because he didn't want rumor. He was very careful about stuff like that. Very private man. You know, I think if somebody knew that was happening, I think it would have got out really quick. A lot quicker than it does today. That's just my thought. That's my, it's not even a theory. It's just my thought, But there you go. I think I proved reasonable doubt. And, 9 weeks of studying this, I'm about, bless her heart, with Lizzie. But I got to tell you, when I was about ready to make this, when I did it last night, I said a little prayer for her in a memory. It's like these people need to rest. I think I get very irritated when I pull up a video of some young gentleman or young lady that goes into one of these places, the Liska or the Borden, and they just right out the gate they start spouting what I don't know if they know it's the truth or not. It just seems like they're making it up as they go along, and then other people are watching it and think it's true, and that irks me. Because history, if you do not learn from it, you are destined to repeat it. And when people with professional, expert written under their name or letters after their name or PhD, doctor this, that they say it's definitive that this has happened and they don't have the evidence, people take that as fact. And you cannot tell me this is rare. We proved that it's not rare. A lot of axe murdering going on in the 40-year span. And a lot of them were very close to a train. And so was Lizzie's house. And that's what started me on this from back 20 years ago. Because I said, that's not rare. Anything could happen. And I'm going to prove it. And I think I did. Or I came darn close. I at least proved reasonable doubt. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. We got a lot of holidays coming. Whatever you celebrate or don't celebrate, I hope that this season brings a little bit of light. I always felt like it was kind of a magic around this time, even though I know it's the birthday's off and it's September, it's not December and everything else. This is the thing. This is the time of year where you can do little secret things for somebody just to make them smile, or knock on your neighbor's door. And, like I did that one time, I ran around in my bathroom to Santa hat, put candles and cookies and stuff. Do something that makes your heart smile. And if you can make somebody else's heart smile too, that's good. I've gone through a lot of stuff over the past couple of months, that you guys don't know about and wouldn't bring it up here. You heard me go off last weekend. Why? Because it was a buildup of multiple things. It wasn't one thing that just made me go. It's multiple, And when I get to that point, I'm going to just tell the truth. I'm going to tell you how I feel, because I haven't been lying to you for all the years I've been on the radio and I've been here. And my whole point to be here is to try to bring the facts to the paranormal, the supernatural, the Bigfoot, or whatever. If you tell me you got fairies living in your pillow, honey, maybe you do. I can't say you don't. But when you tell me you got fairies living in your pillowcase and Bigfoot lives in your refrigerator, I'm going to go, you know what? Maybe you need to stop and, kind of take a minute and try to, join us here in reality for a minute. I'm not going to bring people on here that are going to lie to you. Fun is one thing. Pretending is another. I'm 60 years old. I want to leave something behind that tries hard to tell the truth and has fun and tries to bring some light to these people. That comment meant a lot to me. All your comments mean a lot to me. When you come on, Ted, and you and Edna, and so many people that leave comments, it means the world to me, because it means that you hear me. You hear what I'm putting down. And I think it's an excellent way to look at life now. Discern what people are telling you. A lot of people are lying. You know what I mean? And now we can discern, because they've been lying for a very long time. Your history is important. Your culture is important. Your ancestors are important. And what's also important is those that go after us. And I'm just trying to leave a little bit of extra light and a little bit of extra facts and a little bit of extra love for people that come in the future and people that are here now. I love each and every one of you. And I hope this brought you some light to this case. We'll never know the answers. Those that know have passed over and are already dealing with whatever it is they have to go through. Lynn can verify that. I know it. But I do think that these people need to rest, and we probably need to stop lying about them. So maybe now you can go forward and tell people what you learned about this. You know, and the next time you hear kids jump rope into that song, what a horrible thing to be singing to as a little kid. You know, they don't even know what they're talking about. But it probably should have never been in the first place. It's all lies. Okay? Thank you guys so much for being here this Christmas, this holiday, this Hanukkah, Festivus for the rest of us. You know, is Kwanzaa still a thing? If it is, and you celebrate that, great. They have great colors. You know, I'm a red and green. I'm a, you know, bring out the old ornaments and think about the people and the memories. I cherish each and every, you know, each bit of that. You know, filling this house full of love, adopting kitties, you know, try to be a decent human being. I actually told that to my son today. I said, I have raised a decent human being. My work here is done. It's the best thing you can do. And try to tell the truth and bring out the facts and question everything. Like Edgar Allan Poe said, believe half of what you see, or no, believe half of what you hear, a quarter of what you see, and don't believe anything that you don't know to be a fact because people, I don't know. You know the quote. You know the thing. Just, you know, question everything. There you go. Question it. You know? And be glad you weren't Lizzie Borden that day. Or Andrew or Avery. Okay? Because I don't think either one of them, nobody deserved what they got. You know? Or the 135 that the man killed on the plane. And I guarantee it was probably closer to 300, most experts say. The man on the train. You know, these people got away with a lot. Go do their deed, jump back on the train, go to the next town, do it again. You know. So, there you go. Love you guys. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Glad you liked the music and the kitties and everything else. And I hope I made you smile. And I hope I made you think about this. You know, maybe say a little prayer for the Bordens tonight, because I think their names got dragged through the mud for nothing. And for, if nothing else, 2 people lost their lives that day, and I think it should be held with a little bit more respect. But now, you know, when you see those crime scene photos, you'll be forever able to say they're not, they were staged. The pictures aren't even true. There you go. Thanks, guys, for being here tonight. Thanks for putting up with this Hot Mess Express. I'm glad you all are out there, and I look forward every week to seeing you. Tomorrow night, Steve and I will be here doing Monday Madness, and I believe Steve has picked a very interesting topic. I think he wanted it called Head Scratchers and Ass Grabbers. So we'll see where that takes us tomorrow night. Should be fun. I love each and every one of you, and the kittens say hi. They're sleeping. I'm surprised you can't hear them purring. I love you all. Be kind to your furry friends. And be kind to each other until we meet again tomorrow night. Keep your feet under the covers. Keep the closet door shut, because there are things that go bump in the night. Good night, everybody. Love you.